It's 3 o'clock, and we are going to get started with our study session, which, judging by our attendance here, this is really one of the actually, it's a favorite topic of mine. But, and Ms. Driscoll from Development
Services.
I knew you, and I rehearsed that for 10 seconds before I said it. And
We're actually in the
still
running
came out wrong.
for longest department name. It's technically
Right.
Community and Development Services.
Right.
So thank you, Mr.
Floor is
Mayor.
yours.
Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community and Development Services. Appreciate this opportunity this afternoon. City Manager Scragg asked me to intro this subject. It is, as you mentioned, Mayor Davis, actually a really important topic. And it's a fairly wide breadth topic. Under Community and Development Services, we handle property maintenance, so that's everything from grass and weed violations to junk and trash, inoperable vehicles, all the way up to dangerous structures. And so in talking with City Manager Scragg, wanted an opportunity, I think this issue has come up in a variety of ways, to have our team talk to you this afternoon a little bit about what some of the details are behind that breadth of services related to those issues, how we handle those currently, and maybe some tools that we could look to in the future to handle these issues better. And also to give you a little bit of our track record and what we've been doing. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Building Official Sean Pilcher and Deputy Building Official Sean Homan. So thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Howdy.
Thank you for your interest in what it is that we do. As Lauren stated, what we do is really, really broad in scope and comes with an interesting set of challenges. And so I'm very happy to be able to talk to you about what we do, how we do it, and potentially to make a request that you help us to do some things with another tool at the end. So, Mr. Pilcher, I'm going to invite you, anytime I'm going through this presentation, this is really our presentation, I'm going to invite him to jump in anytime I leave anything out that might be helpful to all of you. So let's begin. Property maintenance code enforcement is a bit of a misnomer when you're talking about what it is that our code enforcement officers do out on the street, because they actually delve into several chapters in the Salina Municipal Code. These folks are the boots on the ground, and so they're out and about in the community, and they have eyes on all sorts of things, and so often they are tapped in order to help with matters such as tall grass and weeds, that's garden variety, trash, rubbish, or debris that needs to be cleaned up, do lots and lots of that. Parking on the grass, again, several of those violations can be seen daily anywhere in town that you go. That's actually a zoning code violation, not property maintenance. Inoperable vehicles, same way. Swimming pools have regulations that come from both Chapter 8 in the City Code and the International Residential Code, because permanent in-ground pools have fencing requirements and regulations for closing and latching gates and fence heights and things that keep folks from being able to access them and create life safety situations. Also, dilapidated and dangerous structures fall under the purview of property maintenance code officers, at least at first. Unsecure structures, same way. Whenever we have squatters, perhaps, who have come to an abandoned or vacant property and neighbors report, we'll go check that out initially, look for safety concerns, make sure that we can get PD to help board that up, secure the structures, and take care of mitigating that hazardous situation. We often deal with reports of infestations. Often we'll have tenants call us and report an infestation they believe is the responsibility of a landlord to take care of, and so when we are invited in, we make it indoors. Most of what we do is outside, but if invited in, we'll go in and take a look for any known hazards, safety issues, sanitation issues, and then try to address those, if not directly, by referral to the appropriate agency within the city or the state. Once we're on the inside, we're aware of minimum housing requirements that include lighting, heating requirements for heating facilities, means of egress. Often we have hoarding situations where the egress has been blocked, creating a terrible life hazard in the event, safety hazard in the event of a fire. So we might be the first folks to respond to deal with something like that before there is an emergency. Checking for presence of smoke alarms, again, it's a minimum housing requirement, and also graffiti, anywhere it can be seen in town. Often we go out first. Next slide, please. So some of these violations, many of them fall under Chapter 31, which is actually our property maintenance code. That's most of the trash, the rubbish, the debris, the grass and weeds, the things that we do many of every day. But as you can see from this slide, we actually handle animal and livestock violations from Chapter 7. We work with the animal services folks to look for the placement of a chicken coop, for example, to make sure it's 50 feet from any structures, any neighbors. There aren't too many chickens in the coop or on the property. Often we end up, we're on the property for one reason, and we end up making a call to one of our cohorts in animal services to help us clean up an entire situation on a given property. I mentioned earlier the swimming pools and their enclosures. Again, that's from Chapter 8 and also the IRC. Chapter 13 is our Community Relations Divisions chapter. And as you can imagine, when dealing with property maintenance issues, often we will have folks who will tell us that they feel that the particular situation at their house is very different from renters who also rent from the same landlord, and they believe it's for a discriminatory reason that the landlord is not helping them as effectively as the others. And so very often we are taking the first notes and documenting and taking pictures and then making an appropriate referral to the folks who provide that service in the Community Relations Division so they can investigate. We get into Chapter 22 occasionally, dealing with manufactured and mobile home parks. Also RVs, where can they be and for how long? Can they be in your yard? Can you have your guests stay in an RV? Yes, for 15 days in the backyard. So often we're out and into that chapter frequently as well. Chapter 34 deals with refuse carts. Because our folks are on the street all the time, very often we see cans that are left out at the curb and not returned to the front yard building line as they should be on the evening of the day of pickup. And so we're called on to help with that, save the general services folks some calls and some time. Same with right-of-way maintenance and obstructions from Chapter 35. We have great working relationships with the public works folks, and very often they will just email or call and let us know particular alleys with overgrown branches that are scratching the trucks or might scratch the trucks, and other similar obstructions, and we'll work to get those resolved, to get those out of their way. Chapter 39, we work there when dealing with tree maintenance concerns, hanging over, low-hanging limbs over streets or sidewalks, and that can get tricky. Sometimes the city will do that if it's a public street. If it's over the sidewalk, it's the property owner's responsibility. If it's an alley, it's property owners to the center, et cetera, et cetera. But we live in that chapter sometimes as well. And finally, the biggest, as far as we're concerned with daily tasks that are not in Chapter 31, the biggest chapter where we work is Chapter 42, which is zoning regulations for the city. Lots of types of violations that we might deal with here. Parking on the grass is one. Inoperable vehicles, permitted uses for a given parcel. If you have someone operating a commercial business out of their backyard, well, zoning regulations do not permit that, and so code enforcement officers would go out and document and, to the degree that we can, gather information, investigate that in case there is an enforcement matter that needs to be pursued there. Temporary signs, and of course during election season that's a hot topic, as you all know well. Accessory structures. We are often called upon to count how many and how big, and was there a permit, was there not a permit, is it in the easement, has the proper setback been observed, was there a permit, was there not a permit, and so these will begin also with code enforcement officers out on the street. Fences, where they can be and can't be, and finally planned development districts, lots of special pockets in town with special rules. And so it's not just Chapter 31. When we're talking about what the property maintenance folks do, it's a very broad range of duties in lots of chapters in our code. Next slide, please. It's a little bit about what we do. So now to answer the question, how do we do it? Well, we begin with 2 full-time code enforcement officers and 1 full-time administrative tech. And this tech also processes building permits as needed for the Building Services Division, and so really they are shared. We utilize different kinds of tools in the varied things we do. We like the gentle tools when they're effective and seem appropriate. That's just having a conversation, perhaps giving a verbal warning with a citizen about some code violation that we've come across or that has been reported. Sometimes we'll send a courtesy letter to an individual or to a neighborhood or to everyone on a block, very often about the alley that needs to be cleaned up in winter when we have time to go through and check those. If we can get things done with a courtesy letter, it's less formal, folks generally respond better, and there are fewer ruffled feathers. So we like those tools when we feel like they can use them. The time extension is just what it sounds like. Whenever we issue a violation notice for a particular problem on a property, very often a homeowner will call and say, hey, I got your notice, I recognize it's a problem, and I'm working on it, but I'm not going to be finished by the deadline. Could you give me a little more time? And as long as the request is within reason, of course, we work with citizens to allow adequate time for them to finish up. If these gentle means of enforcement don't work, or we don't feel they're appropriate, then we may go straight to the formal means at our disposal, and that begins with a formal violation notice. This part is required by statute, contains the date, the violation information, the particular code section that is in violation of, and also particular corrective action, including a deadline, always at least 10 days after the notice is sent, again by statute. And if folks do not call us and do not get it taken care of, then it falls to us to abate that nuisance, to correct. And when items go to abatement, we will send a contractor who will go out, perform the correction, and then we will bill the property owner for the cost of the correction plus a $130 administrative fee, and that, of course, is set by the commission. At that point, there is a bill that goes out to property owner, and if it is not paid timely, then we will do an assessment. We will put a lien against the property that is attached to the deed in order that ultimately we hope that we will get paid for the services we performed to bring the property into compliance. Second to last on the formal list is the administrative search warrant. Whenever necessary, either to correct, because we're going to be taking items that are not just trash, if we have to remove an item that has significant value. For example, an inoperable vehicle always has a scrap value at least. We will go get a warrant in order to do that. Also, we may need a warrant simply to gain access. There are folks in town who will put up private property, no trespassing signs, and wherever we see those, we know we get a warrant to do anything that we do. We can walk around the sidewalk, we can walk one straight path to the door to take pictures, but when it comes to correction, we err on the side of caution and get a warrant in order to go and fix and finish the process that way. Finally, of course, we have the municipal court to whom we can make court referrals for particular violations, but naturally this takes a little more time and a little more money, and really we could fill the court's docket every day with parking on the grass violations, and that would not be helpful to anyone. But it is an option, and we're grateful for them because there are cases where that's the tool we have. So, next slide, please. Some stats. How much of what we do are we doing? Well, as you can see here, violations identified, and I want to emphasize that these are logged violations only for years 2019 to 2021. There are a significant number of violations that we handle very informally. For example, if I'm an officer and I'm out with the neighbor at my right hand here, and we're talking about the inoperable vehicle in the driveway, and the neighbor at my left hand comes out and overhears the conversation and has the same or maybe a different property maintenance issue, sees the logo on the truck or the car, and then asks me about their property maintenance issue, we may just have a gentle conversation. It might not be appropriate to take a picture and introduce formality when they're letting me know what's going on and we're talking about it and they're willing to correct. Well, that's great. I'm not going to step on that with formality. I'll just take a look when I come back in about 12 days to check on your neighbor's grass or the inoperable vehicle. I'll have a look at yours too. And so if you can get that corrected by then, you won't even see anything from us. Thank you. Have a nice day. And so there are interactions like that on a daily basis that do not make it into the stats. And so this is not the sum and total of what our code enforcement officers do, but it is a good representation of all of the logged violations, all of those that do make it into the system. And of course, as with everything, 2020 numbers were affected by COVID, so you can see a significant dip there where we were not working and folks were not out and doing. But you can see a bit of an increase over time in the number of violations we respond to. Next slide, please. Not all violations that we identify out in the community require the sending of a notice. I mentioned earlier, we like the gentle means of enforcement, a door hanger, a conversation, a courtesy letter, a phone call if appropriate. But 2,015 times in 2019 and 2,286 times in 2021, we did go ahead and send a formal violation notice to a property owner with at least a 10-day deadline for correction. Next slide, please. There are multiple inspections that take place for each violation. There is the initial, where we document everything we need in order to establish that the violation exists, and everything we need should we have to go to court for a warrant, for example, to get back on the property in order to correct. And as you can see here, there were almost 7,000 inspections in 2019 and almost 8,000 inspections by our inspectors in 2021. And obviously our numbers are incomplete from this year as we're in August. And also we have had one code enforcement officer out for a number of months for military duty, and we've been down staff a little bit, and still we're at about 5,000. We'll go over 5,000 today for 2022. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, whenever we make violations known, if property owners will not correct, do not want to, tell us they will not do so, it falls upon us to send the contractor out and make sure that it is corrected. That's in the public interest. Note, please, that about 90% of all of our logged violations are corrected by property owners. So 9 out of 10 times, folks do whatever we ask them to when we show them what code says, and that's the way we like it, right? It's much gentler, it's better. It's a better outcome, but when we have to, we will perform an abatement action in order to correct. And you can see the numbers there, 280 in 2019. 2021, again, we were down some staff and numbers were down a bit, 193. Next slide, please. And these abatement actions in particular, but enforcement scenarios in general, are widely varied. Many of them are very quick and clean. They're the garden variety things that we do every day. Going to cut tall grass and weeds, although that can be complicated with no trespassing signs and require a warrant, so extra time and money to accomplish that one. Trash, taking trash to the dump is not difficult. We do that frequently. Even if it's a large violation, even if it's trash covering the entire backyard, it's still the same process. It just takes the contractor longer. Right-of-way obstructions are another example. It's all very cut and dried in codes. We have tools that are very easy for us to utilize to take care of these violations in a timely fashion. There are other violations we deal with that are a little more difficult and can even be complex. Inoperable vehicles, I mentioned earlier, are a little more difficult only because they require an administrative search warrant every time we take a vehicle. We don't like to take property if we have to. If it has any value at all beyond garbage or trash, we will go to the court and get a warrant in order to do so. And we do that. It takes a little more time. It's a little more complex than the run-of-the-mill stuff. Dilapidated structures. We're going to spend a little more time talking about that in a little while. But this is a broad category. This could be anything from flaking, peeling, chipping paint to gutters falling off and deterioration in the soffit and the fascia and siding. It could just be anything on the exterior of the property that is probably not yet causing a structural problem. Just a dilapidation, lack of maintenance sort of issue. At the other end of the spectrum for structures are the dangerous structures, those that for one reason or another, the building envelope has been compromised structurally. And very often our guys and gals that are out on the street all the time will take a picture and bring it back into building inspectors and say, hey, here's what I saw. You might want to take a look. And so they end up working on the front end of the dangerous structure problems as well. I've already mentioned parking on the grass. I want to take a minute to talk about why parking on the grass violations are difficult to enforce, because it seems a very simple problem, right? Guy or gal comes home from work, they park in the front yard. You're not supposed to do that in the city limits. It would be easy to move the car back to the driveway or to the street, problem solved. And if that were all that there is to it, that would be true. However, the tools that we have for enforcement currently, we are required to give formal notification statutorily, so we send a violation notice. And statutorily, we have to give 10 days to correct. So we do, every time. What that means is, in theory, and often unfortunately works out in practice, is that 10 out of 11 days, a person can be in violation of parking on the grass code from Chapter 42, subsection 552E2, 10 days out of 11 with no real penalty, because as long as they have the car on the grass or the street or at work, not on the grass, when we go back to reinspect, we close out that violation as corrected by property owner. And then when we come by tomorrow and it's back in the grass, well, now we start all over again. Certified letter, process, 10 days to correct. So it's not quite as easy to correct a simple violation as perhaps it could be. I'll return to that in just a few minutes. I already mentioned swimming pools. What makes swimming pools difficult at times is, for example, 80-mile-an-hour straight line wind bursts that take down fences that were required because there was a permanent in-ground pool in the backyard. And now, by Chapter 8, City Code, and the IRC, that fence must be put back. And so if property owners don't have the money or the means, the ability, they don't want to put it back, then we will have to go with some sort of construction barrier, temporary fence, do a court referral. So it can take longer for correction than what would be ideal. Abatements that are difficult or complex sometimes may be dropped. I mentioned parking on the grass, right? I assure you our folks are driving by parking on the grass violations daily. We can't help but do that. We don't have enough staff to police all of that. And also the tools that we have don't let us process very many of those at a time if folks don't comply the first time we send a notice. Again, we'll circle back to that. Dilapidated structure issues, structures that need paint only. If you have your eyes open driving around town, there are lots and lots and lots and lots, dozens of buildings around town that need prepped and painted again, right? And one of the great difficulties in abating structures that need paint is we're not generally in the business of doing construction work or home improvement or those sorts of things when we do property abatements. We usually take away the thing that's a problem. But where the thing that's a problem is deterioration of something that has to stay, it presents a real challenge. How do we do that? How many do we do? Where do we start? Right? There are lots of questions, again, that we'll get to in just a bit. Next slide, please.
If I might, Sean, sometimes we will do some, I guess, construction-based, mainly demolition-based on an emergency basis. Right. We've had just recently a couple of porch roofs that either fell or looked like they were very, very near falling, and we'll go out there and we'll take care of that right away. But yeah, like Sean said, as far as, you know, we're not going to come out and paint your house or fix your gutters or things like that. So that's kind of where we are for abatement. We will use our abatement contractors for immediate danger things, but not.
And your court is strictly municipal court? Or do any of these have to go up the district court?
Sure. Well, anytime, that's a great question. Generally, we utilize municipal court, certainly at first, for any court referrals for issues that we cannot gain compliance working with citizens. However, anytime we have to get a warrant necessarily, that has to go through the district court. You could not have a city entity going to the municipal court, another city entity, to get a warrant. And so that necessarily, by statute, gets kicked up to the district court. And so we have a great relationship, and the city prosecutor's office has been incredibly helpful about helping us adopt a very efficient process for obtaining warrants, for example, when we need to do that. I suppose it is possible that if we were dealing with a big enough abatement or a big enough issue, I could see that the issues might get kicked up to district court. But for the most part, the only thing I have seen as long as I have been here are referrals to muni court. and we just run it through the municipal.
I think the other thing I would add to, we are in study session. I think the other thing I'd add is like the litmus test we often run on whether, can we actually abate that? Is that a construction issue? Is that a removal issue? Is human life safety. If there is a safety issue, for instance, those porch roofs about ready to collapse. I mean, it was going to happen. And in that situation, it's not like we built the roof back. We removed the issue, as Sean said, so that the danger was no longer there. But certain things like paint, that's not a health, life, safety issue. Is it unsightly? Yes. Is it a property maintenance issue? I think we could all have a good discussion about that. But is it a life safety issue? So those are some of the things as we go back and forth on how do we take care of these that we ask that question.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I've told you the scope of what we do, and I've talked to you about some of the challenges in doing what it is that we do. Now I want to show you some of the ways that we are constantly improving what it is that we do. I mentioned inoperable vehicles a number of times and a new warrant process. It takes us now 4 fewer hours every time we have to pull one of those in order to pull an inoperable vehicle from a property. So we're saving time and money. We're increasing capacity. Regarding dilapidated structures, this is a particularly tricky domain, but we have a fellow in the department who is currently researching renovation and rehab monies, whether in the form of grants, potential programs for low or no interest loans. We're gathering all of the data that there is in order to have a picture of what might be possible in the future, to be proactive rather than enforcing, going in and correcting. Is there a way to refer to resources that we might help to bring about? We would not provide them directly, but we might be a part of helping find them and help folks design programs in order to be very proactive and fix structures that are dilapidated before they would become dangerous, for example, to stop the deterioration. Regarding dangerous structures, thank you. We have an increased budget for 2023, 50% more than we have for 2022 in order to increase capacity in that manner. Also, actually, the warrant process helps with that. We have some process and some efficiency fixes that we've implemented to be able to have a little more capacity in the same time. It's noteworthy that prior to 2022, we were running about 2 structures per year through the dangerous structures process, and 8 months into 2022, we are at 5, with obviously an expected increase for 2023.
There'll be 2 more coming, so that number will be soon 7. So.
Very good. So Mr. Pilcher mentioned earlier the holes in the roof, porches falling off, right? These next level or second tier correction items. These we do deal with on an emergency basis where necessary. Code is very clear in giving Mr. Pilcher the ability to make that call and to deal with those, and so we do. And again, we have increased our capacity through process fixes and now an increased budget. So we feel like we're making improvements on every front with those types of corrections. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the everyday corrections, right? The structures that need paint, our swimming pools I mentioned, zoning code violations, all of that, because I'm convinced that in order to do more of what we do and to do it well, we need a new tool, and we need that from you. And we're also going to need a little bit of direction for its use. Next slide, please. I believe the tool we need is the ability to write citations. Why citations? Well, for one reason, quicker correction. I mentioned the parking on the grass, a pretty minor violation in terms of what it is or how to get there, and seems like there should be a pretty minor solution for enforcement, but as I pointed out earlier, it takes a lot of time and a lot of staff hours, and we still cannot guarantee compliance going forward 10 days out of 11, ever. If we had the ability to write citations, we could give 1 10-day notice per year. That puts the property owner on notice that this is a code violation. You're not supposed to park on the grass, and when we return, if you're parking on the grass, you'll be cited. We can do that, and according to existing code, any property maintenance code or the other violations that we enforce from other sections of the code, each day constitutes a new violation. And so we could do this until the proper motivation level was found that a person would move the vehicle off of their property. And this would allow for much quicker correction because there would be a felt consequence for the violation, and we wouldn't have to go 10, 11, 12 days per occurrence, and then perhaps a court referral for enforcement, because we don't tow cars. We don't want to tow cars for parking on the grass. That seems a bit disproportionate to the offense. And so we're asking for the ability to write citations.
You may want to just highlight, it's almost like a ticketable offense, being like $10 or $50.
Yes, yeah, and actually that's an important point to make. Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. What we're talking about is not necessarily hefty fines. We're talking about things like parking tickets. You get ticketed when you park in the wrong spot at the curb. We're asking you to give us the authority to ticket folks, property owners, I'll be clear about that, property owners when folks are parked on the grass. And of course, those fine amounts would be set by the commission. Now, another reason, proportion.
And if they don't pay those, then they would file a claim against the property?
Yes, sir. An assessment in the same way we would if we hauled trash away. Exactly right. In fact, it's probably worth noting at this point, because of the structures we have in place, we would not be ticketing vehicle owners, we would be ticketing the property owner, because we give notice to the property owner. And it is the property owner's responsibility to control those things which are on the property.
So I've got a rental and the people are parking on the grass. It's up to the landlord to enforce that.
Yes, sir, it is, as with all other violations on the property. We already enforce it that way for everything having to do with the structure, inside the structure and outside the structure, but not with parking. I'm asking you to allow us to treat it the same way, because I'm confident that through leases or what have you, those costs can be passed from landlord to tenant where appropriate. But I believe this is the most effective way to be able to establish compliance with current code.
You've talked about parking on the grass more than anything.
Yes, sir.
Is that due to citizen complaints, or do you patrol and see a car parked on the grass and write a ticket?
Both, sir, both. As a matter of fact, in the last week, we just had a letter from a citizen, very thoughtful, very well-worded, very polite letter asking us to please enforce the parking on the grass violations that are in the neighborhood. They're frustrated because these have been reported over time, and our officers do go out, and they acknowledge that. The officers come by, see the city logoed vehicle, and then the car is removed from the grass for a day or two, and then it comes back. And it's there almost all the time. And so they call us again, and we go out and we write another notice, and 10 or 11 days it's
Define
moved.
parking on the grass. Is this someone parking over on the side yard, right up in the front yard next to the door, or a little bit over the curb, or?
All of the above, sir. Yeah, anytime a vehicle is not parked upon a surface portion of the property or on a street or anywhere that it can be parked legally, then it's, if it's on grass, can't be parked there. Only exception, I mentioned this earlier briefly, you may have a guest of a householder that has an RV in the backyard. Say the kids come to visit, or your aunt comes to visit, and she has an RV. Well, she can park it in the backyard for 15 days for the visit, and then it has to be off the grass. And so this is one of those items in zoning code that is particularly tricky to be effective in enforcement, because we don't have tools that keep up with the violations, and we don't have the means at our disposal to motivate people not to violate. All they have to do is move the car, and then we leave, and they put it back, and the clock resets.
What about like a utility trailer?
A utility trailer on the property?
Yes.
That's a tricky one. Yes, we could have a study session on parking on the grass and on this portion of zoning code alone. But generally, if it's a little yard cart like you pull behind your lawnmower, something like that, we're probably not going to get excited about that. Technically, in current code, I hesitate to say this, going out to all the world for everybody who might,
There you go.
everybody who might be listening, but here we go. Current code does not define a trailer as a vehicle. And so the only trailer that is treated as a vehicle in the city of Salina currently is an RV trailer, a camping trailer. A bumper pull camper trailer is treated as a recreational vehicle that has its own motive power. And so those cannot be parked on the grass. Technically, any other trailers in the city limits that are not commercial or, right, there are other rules. Generally, I'm talking about residences, residential areas. Trailers, in fact, can be parked on the grass. They simply cannot be obstructing a right-of-way. They can't be over the sidewalk. They can't be loaded with something that's another violation, trash, for example. Can't create a clear sight triangle obstruction. They have to create another nuisance for us to enforce regarding trailers.
Is a boat considered a vehicle?
It is not defined so in code, sir. That's the next logical question. Yeah, it is not yet.
Because that can be just as annoying as a vehicle.
Yeah, we do get those calls for
Yeah.
people parking on the street, detaching from the boat, leaving that, in street parking, and there are some nuances to that too, how long it's left there, where it's left, and the proximity to the owner, things like that. But I think, for time's sake, as we're coming up against your regular meeting, the citation component of what we're trying to address with you is outside of typical abatement activities, grass, weeds, junk and trash.
Lauren,
there's a
could you
breadth-
use the mic?
Sorry, there's a breadth of activities that are happening from that junk and trash component all the way up to those difficult situations. And if everything beyond junk and trash and in-op vehicles needs to go to municipal court, one, that's not very effective for municipal court. It's not very effective to our staff. We can't really get to stuff. And I think, as staff, we can see a number of situations where if there was kind of an immediate effect of a ticket or a citation that had a fiscal component to it, we could get some of those moving along. Suddenly, there was an urgency to that rather than waiting till we get to court and hashing that all out. And so when we're getting letters from citizens saying, hey, can you do something, what tools do we have? And I think Sean's covered those. Not probably everything we could have in our toolbox. And this isn't a unique tool that we're asking for that's special to Salina. I've had it in every other municipality I've worked in. And if you were to poll our neighbors, you would see that they have citation powers as well.
And I think just to verify that for everyone, if that citation is issued and there's a fine, and we're talking about to the property, that's, in order to collect that, that's added to the property tax statement, the real estate property tax statement at the end of the year, correct?
Yes, sir. If it is not paid as soon as it is billed from the city clerk's office, it would be attached to the deed. That's
It's
correct.
similar to the abatement
Right.
cost.
Yes.
30-day window to pay it, and then
Right.
if not, it'd be assessed.
And it's up to, usually it's, up to $500 a day. And then code gives guidance to what that should be for those various violations. But it can be escalated too if the issue is prolonged.
And really, in order to move things along, because we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm coming to the end of the ask, I suppose. But I want you to understand some underlying assumptions that we who do this every day are working under. One, a lot of property owners who have these violations and are repeat offenders, they could correct, but they don't. Okay? Many who park on the grass know this is a violation, but they also know that they don't really have a significant consequence when they do it, and it's convenient. Many folks who have life safety violations for swimming pools, for example, that if they've done it before, they know it takes a lot of time because we usually end up sending that sort of matter to court. And a lot of folks understand the zoning requirements because we send them the notices with the violations and explain it, but they just choose not to correct, again, because there's no quick felt consequence. And so we want an enforcement tool that motivates, right? Lets us be more efficient, lets us be incredibly effective compared to what we're doing now, because we are confident that a small fiscal consequence for a lot of these violations will take care of them in most cases. It's not going to take care of everything. I can tell you that, gentlemen. There isn't a tool that's going to take care of everything. But those that are difficult, this is a tool that we need in order to process many more of these appropriately. And again, it does require a code amendment. Next slide, please.
And I know we have talked about parking on the grass a lot, but swimming pools is another thing that would be very beneficial to have this tool. A lot of people will go buy a portable pool, like the big blue bladder pools at Walmart or wherever, and they're either A, not aware of the rules that are in place for safety for them and the neighborhood, because we want to be sure and have a fence around those two, keep kids from just jumping in, our neighborhood kids or whatever. And also there's electrical issues, things like that. Don't put them under power lines, those, so on and so forth. We don't like to necessarily get a search warrant to come, take pools away from people or whatever. But a citation for something like that would definitely be a better way to track that. I mean, refer something like that to municipal court. It could take a couple of months to actually get to the docket at municipal court. And by that time, summer's over and they're taking that anyway. And and so, we're trying to avert safety issues too. So
Does the city code address the depth of the pool?
Yes.
And okay,
24 inches.
okay.
And the height of the fence?
It's 42 inches for a temporary pool or 6 feet for a permanent pool.
What do most people have? Don't they usually, I mean, if you were renting a place or you had bought a place that had fencing up, it's typically 8 foot, 6 foot?
A privacy fence is typically 6 feet. Your chain link fence is typically 42-ish, and that's what most people put up if they buy a temporary pool, is something like that. Some people will go ahead and put up the privacy fence, but we see a lot of both.
Well, and then you touched on an interesting scenario when the tenant goes and puts up a pool and the landlord doesn't know. And so our permit requires that the property owner sign off on that. But if they chose to put that up and, for whether they were unaware or didn't care, and they put the pool up anyways, that's a whole nother scenario when trying to deal with abating that and handling that.
So, some very important information that I want you to hear here at the end. We're talking about citations as an enforcement tool after we provide the statutorily required violation notice for particular violations. We're not talking about running around and just slinging tickets to the wind for everything we see. We're talking about giving notice, appropriate notice with all of the information required, and then in some ways treating this as an intermediate abatement action, right, in order to motivate correction, going and issuing citations towards the end of motivating folks to go ahead and correct in a way that's less expensive for them, less expensive for us, for citizens' tax dollars, for abatement dollars, and is all around more efficient. Also, we're asking that the notice requirement for particular violation types would be good for a year rather than for each particular violation. We already have this with grass and weeds violations. Once we notify you once in a season that your grass is taller than 8 inches, the notice you receive in the mail tells you that next time we may not call. We may just send the contractor and take care of it and bill you. We want the ability to be able to do this with all of the violations on the property that we deal with, because we believe it would make us incredibly more effective and efficient. It's really, it fills a gap we have because of the formality of some of our corrective
And I
actions.
noticed on there it talks about owner and also talks about occupant. So if it's a rental property, usually the mailing address for the tax statement's different than that. So the notice would be sent to both property
Yes,
owner and to the property address.
Yes, sir. That's what we do with all of our violations. In fact, the certified copy is sent to the owner, wherever the address of record is for the property, the owner of record is, rather. And then a courtesy copy is sent out to the tenant as well. Very often that one will get there first, tenant will take care of it, and landlord makes a call, it's done. We do send courtesy copies every time that's applicable. But I want you to notice we have this language already for grass and weeds violations, and we would just like to be able to do the same with the other violation types. Next slide, please. And again, after the required 10-day notice has been provided, we're going to meet all the due process elements with this proposal, in that recipient of the notice always has the ability to appeal before the correction deadline, to call us and say, hey, you told me that I had trash in the backyard, but I don't, right? I want to appeal this. And there's nothing that we are eliminating about any of the requirements currently by doing this. Again, we're doing the notice, we're going through the entire process. We're simply asking for another tool on the back end before we have to go to full abatement that can be time-consuming and costly. On the back of all of our violation notices currently, there's a clause that I've put on the screen there. If subject violation pertains to weeds or plant growth, the city may also have additional weed or plant growth violations corrected and bill the costs, including admin fees, against the property without further notice during the current calendar year per state law. We're asking permission to let our legal folks look into whether this can and does include the other sections of code we enforce, not just the grass. Next slide, please. So, to wrap up, the need for enforcement, property maintenance code, and the other sections of code that our PMC enforcers enforce in the community, the number of incidents, they're all on the rise. We're developing new enforcement tools all the time. We're looking for more resources for renovation and rehab for structures in order that we can fix or see, not we can fix, we can see fixed the issues that need to be, rather than having to go to abatement. We have an increased budget for demolitions of dangerous structures for 2023, all improvements. They're going to help us to do more. I believe in the end, citations are needed for improved enforcement of some difficult violation types. And again, this is not something that is a fix-all. It could never be that. But it is a tool that, if used wisely and applied fairly and equitably, I believe would help us to accomplish much more in a way that would make a considerable difference in the appearance of the properties all around Salina. So, that being said, we're at the end of the presentation, and we would entertain any questions you may have.
Peer communities are using citations, Hutchinson, McPherson, Manhattan, Abilene.
I have not spoken with code enforcement officers in communities where they're doing that. I'm actually not on the road anymore. I'm serving in a different capacity, and I'm still involved, but I'm not on the road. And so I don't interact with code enforcement officers to answer that. Ms. Lauren, do you know?
It's very typical. I mean, if the body so wished, I mean, we could do a rundown of other communities to see which ones, but this is a pretty typical tool for municipalities to use. It's the kind of in-between, right? You know, we have court, and we've got a notice, an abatement. What do you do in between for that middle stuff? And a citation is a pretty normal tool to use.
Maybe our housing study speaks to this, but what percentage of the housing in Salina is rented by landlords?
Because the state of Kansas does not allow us to require rental permits, I can't give you an exact number. We've done some kind of, I don't know, data parceling in the past, trying to look at our owner occupied and looking at utility records like water to see how many water records, if there's more than one account in a home, if that account belongs to the actual home owner. So there's some data that we can get, but I couldn't give you an accurate number, but it's a fair amount. And those are in certain pocketed areas for sure.
I guess what's floating around in my mind is that this is going to fall on the back of the landlords, and that I'm not sure they're going to be as plugged into the system, at least to start out, as the
If I may,
people that are living in the residence and receive the citation directly.
sure. If I may comment on that, I would say only that state statute puts the responsibility for the entire property on the owner, because it's the only party that you really can place the responsibility on. And so we who are in property maintenance code enforcement necessarily are dealing with property owners. And I think you're absolutely correct in seeing that there would be some reaction perhaps to a change in practice. And we would have to be aware of that and use discretion and wisdom in implementing, because it would be a change in the way we do things. But legally, that's the tool, because the owner is the party that is ultimately responsible for everything on their property.
Well, and to be fair, there are landlords out there who are letting us do their property maintenance work for them. We're sending out those notices, they have it, and they're just waiting for us to take them to court. And they know they've got a bit of time to kill, and they can still collect rent. And then we finally get to court, and then they might do something about it. And so meanwhile, the neighborhood is affected. People are seeing those things, wondering, well, if that property can do it, why can't I do it? And it's, you know, our thought here is with citations, that might get the landlord's attention a little bit faster and maybe have them address that issue with their tenant a little bit quicker rather than waiting for that to get all the way to municipal court. Plus, we're clogging municipal court with cases that really don't need to be there. We have other ones that should be there that need to be dealt with.
And I think we have more people complaining about the dilapidated condition of these properties than we have numbers of landlords coming in to offer a reason why they couldn't or shouldn't fix it up.
Philosophically, I'm not opposed to the idea, and to me, logically, it seems like the next step to take. I guess the question I would have would be pertaining to, and I'll use myself as an example since I am a property owner of rentals. And parking on the grass is a pet peeve of mine. To me, it's kind of a sign of potentially an area that's going to be a blight area. It's just an indication that people don't care. That being said, I have people that park on the grass without my permission, and then it's brought to my attention, hopefully by the neighbors, not necessarily you guys. Where I'm going with this, from a legal standpoint as a property owner, if I say, okay, this is a violation, I don't approve of it, I want to get rid of the tenant, and they make it a, Department of Community Relations issue, is that something they're going to factor in?
I would say no if you're treating that tenant the same way you treat all your other tenants. It's in your lease, acknowledging that any violations occurred within the city of, based on code compliance that are not rectified by the tenant. I mean, I would seek legal counsel to get exact wording for your lease.
Sure.
But, I mean, if you were to apply that the same way to all tenants, no matter whether they're one of the members of 7 protected classes, then the answer is no, that's not a community relations violation.
Right. And in fact, to add to that, the documentation that we have would actually be in your favor if ever you had to take a tenant to court, for example, for damages or for whatever might have happened.
And that's kind of where I'm going with that, is that there are rental property owners that want to do the right thing. They
Yes.
care about their properties, and they care about the neighborhoods their properties are in. Because to me, the biggest complaint, if somebody says, hey, this is obviously a rental property in the middle of a neighborhood that's owned by, private owners, it's kind of a negative comment that you don't want hanging over your business. So I think there's a lot of property owners that just want to know where their rights start and begin, or end, I should say.
One other question. I can ride around town, and there's several houses that have, the walls are patched up. There are holes in the walls. I mean, you can look through the wall. The yard is just filled with old cars and trees. Does your office proactively cite those properties before you receive a complaint, or is most of your work complaint-driven?
It's a mix. It's a mix. We maintain a constant list that is updated real time whenever more properties come onto the list for those we need to go check on. Unfortunately, what we often will do is take care of those things that we can resolve quickly, and then the dilapidated structure gets put on the list until we have better tools, or until we have enough time, or until we have enough dollars. And so we would go get the vehicles, we would go get the trash, we would cut the grass, we would cut out the volunteer tree thickets, all those things we can do to make it look nice as we can with a reasonable amount of time and money. But if it holes in the siding and things like this, if nobody's living in it, it's going to take a little more time for us to get to that. We're taking care of the porches falling off and other such more emergency life safety issues.
Well, at the end of the day, our goal is to get compliance willingly. I mean, there are situations where, we could cite and take to court, and it's really not going to fix the problem. And, I think it gets unrecognized that our code compliance officers who are out there, are practically social workers, trying to work through some very complicated situations with people at all ages and all abilities to take care of these issues and so there's a lot of patience that kind of goes in on the front end. It sometimes seems really easy to just say, just clean it up or we'll send them out. Well, sometimes people can make small progress on their own. So there's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it's an investigation to figure out who owns the property. The number of times we find where property's been, left to its own devices and there's a third cousin watching it, or it's got squatters, or that person's in jail. And there's a lot to try and get to the bottom of these things before action can even get taken sometimes.
I had one real quick question. So if I go to the city and I get a permit to pour a concrete pad where I've been parking on the grass, then and I get permission, then I can park that vehicle on that pad?
Yes, provided it's legal to have that there. There are
But I'd have to
minimum
go to the city
requirements
to get
for yard and things like that, but
setbacks
yes,
and stuff, right?
definitely.
Okay.
I guess my question on that was if a person could just kill the grass, spread a little gravel.
Yes, sir. In
Is that
fact,
okay?
on every notice, Mr. Hoppick, I was actually going to give this answer to your question as well,
Okay.
because it fits both. What code requires in residential areas is an improved surface, which in a residential area is defined as gravel, asphalt, concrete, or other substrate approved by the engineering department. And so, yes, to simply grade, kill the grass, throw down gravel, that's adequate.
Okay, here's an issue I've dealt with. The Magnolia and I-135 overpass. Earlier this spring, the weeds were shoulder, chest height. Why did it take me discussing this with the city manager to get a crew up there to clean that up? And why don't you cite KDOT?
Well, we don't have the authority to cite them on their property, sir. We cite for
You can
everything
cite
that's
my property,
within.
but not KDOT.
Because you're within city limits. In fact, you
That
bring
is
up,
not city
your
limits?
question is a good one, sir, and it brings up a really good point that I'm going to throw out there because this is an issue we'll probably talk about in the future. Same is true with railroad rights-of-way. We cannot enforce property maintenance code and railroad rights-of-way because we don't own them. The railroad does. We can ask and we can beg and we can plead and they'll do what they will do because we have no jurisdiction. And in the same way, on state property, we have no jurisdiction to enforce our codes. We can only enforce for our citizens within our city limits.
Well, our
It's
crews
the
did
same
get
thing
up
with
there and do
Kansas
their
State's
work.
building a new dorm out there, and we don't have any permitting or inspections or anything out there because it's state.
It just looks really bad for the city.
Yes, sir.
And also, I would invite the three of you to stick around for the citizens forum today to discuss another issue.
Okay, we are going to break till 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
All right, just after 4 o'clock, and I'm going to welcome you to the August 22nd Salina City Commission meeting. Ask the city clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. Have roll call, please.
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
All right, if you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start with awards and proclamations, 3.1.
Item 3.1, recognition of the month of September 2022 as National Recovery Month in the city of Salina. Valerie Hicks, Senior Recovery Coach at CKF Addiction Treatment, will read the proclamation.
Ms.
Good
Hicks,
afternoon. So mental health and addiction affect communities nationwide. But with commitment and support, people can and do recover. Each September, we recognize the millions of lives that have been transformed through recovery with National Recovery Month, in hopes of increasing awareness and understanding around mental health and addiction. During National Recovery Month, we celebrate the gains made by those in recovery, just as we celebrate health improvements made by those who are managing other chronic health conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease. It's a chance to educate others about recovery from addiction and mental health, the effectiveness of treatment and recovery support services, and that recovery is possible. The National Recovery Month theme is Recovery is for everyone, every person, every family, every community. A strong reminder not only to those in recovery, but those who support them, that recovery belongs to all of us. This year, we ask for all of you to be a part of the solution. The stigma surrounding mental health and addiction continues to create barriers for individuals to receive the help that they need to get better. By shifting our mindset around how we speak about mental health and addiction and how we treat mental health and addiction, we can truly start to make an impact that saves lives. When we share our stories and our journey, we prove that each journey to recovery is a unique one, filled with its own challenges and successes. Most of all, we show that those with mental health and addiction are human beings first and always. For the above reasons, I am asking the citizens of the city of Salina to join me in celebrating this September as National Recovery Month.
Well, thank you. You could actually have this 12 months a year when you consider the need. Tell us what's extra, if anything, is being done in September, or anything you want the city to know about services you offer.
CKF Addiction Treatment, every September, we always host an event. We are doing a run. You don't have to run to join. You can also walk. And then following directly after that, we do have a free pancake feed for anybody in our community.
There'll be some who want to just come for the pancakes. Where is that going to be?
That is going to be at Bill Burke Park this year.
Great.
Yep. And it's September 10th.
September the 10th. I thank you very much.
Yes.
Come up front and but walk slowly because I forgot to sign this before you came here. All right. And we're going to get your picture taken. Wake up sometimes and you realize you didn't do something. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And we will now move to 3.2.
Item 3.2, recognition of the day of September 11, 2022 as National Day of Service and Remembrance Day in the city of Salina. Chief Tony Snyder, Salina Fire Department, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor,
Hi there.
City Commissioners, Mike, Jake, and everybody back here and everybody joining us virtually. Thank you for this opportunity. City of Salina, Kansas proclamation. Whereas on September 11th, 2001, the American people endured the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil in the nation's history with courage and bravery. And whereas in response to this tragedy, Americans across the country came together in a remarkable spirit of devotion and unity and carried out countless acts of kindness. And whereas September 11th is a day to honor the memory of those who were lost and those who united in response to the tragedy, including first responders and volunteers. And whereas September 11th is observed and recognized as an annual National Day of Service and Remembrance, and whereas on September 11th and on the days leading up to and following this day, citizens have an opportunity to participate in activities that honor 9/11 victims and heroes by joining together. And whereas the City of Salina Fire Department, along with tremendous support of Kansas Wesleyan University, the residents and businesses of the City of Salina and Saline County, will be honoring those who made that ultimate sacrifice by commemorating their heroic charge up the stairs of the World Trade Center towers with a 9/11 stair climb and 5K family walk in remembrance of that fateful day. Now, therefore, I, Trent W. Davis, M.D., Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby recognize September 11th, 2022, as National Day of Service and Remembrance, in witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Salina, Kansas, to be affixed this 22nd day of August 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that this is planned as a walk and not a...
There is no
running.
speed involved. It's either climb the stairs at your own pace or walk at your own pace.
Where is that?
So it will be at the Graves Family Sports Complex on the grounds of Kansas Wesleyan University. The 5K will run Claflin to 9th, down to Cloud, back over around the stadium twice, and then 3 final laps around the track is 5K.
Great. Are there any particular service projects that the fire department would like to see folks?
Well, we'd love to have people come and join. I understand how things are. This is our inaugural climb and walk. And so it's been a little slow getting people to register, but I understand how that is. I think it's going to go over tremendously. And then there's, of course, an after gathering, I'll say, at one of the establishments at the library with live music and food and whatever people decide to buy for themselves for beverages.
That sounds
many-
inviting. And
Yes.
How many trips up and down the stairs is it?
So at the stadium, there's 7 flights. So when you count the steps up, and then you have to include 3 steps down as the equivalent of 1 step up. So it's going to be 7 times around the stadium, which 7 times 7, 49. So the equivalent of 2,011 steps, 110
7
stories.
times on each stairwell?
Yes. So you'll just start at one end and go up and down, and come back, and so that's 7 times. So we're not going to stand there and count everybody's steps. There is no running, there is no race, there is nothing for first place, last place, anything. Teams have the opportunity to continue to get pledges for their own teams, and everything goes through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. Everything is 501c3, and it supports the counseling services of the FDNY. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that since 9/11, there have been 287 line-of-duty firefighter deaths as a result of illness and injury from the occurrences on 9/11/2001. So
Are your guys going to do it in bunker gear?
that's their call. I am not making that call for them. They can if they want. A lot of guys have asked me, can we wear our packs? And God bless them.
right. Come on up and... 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We don't have any public hearings. We'll now move to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of August 15, 2022.
Mayor, I move we approve the minutes of August 15th, 2022.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, which consists of our minutes of last week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now move to 6.1.
Item 6.1, approve resolution number 22-8063, appointing members to citizen boards, commissions, and committees.
Never really know what to say. There are a lot of people appointed this time around, and boy, I would like to read all these names. It's up to the commission, or it's written. We still have a lot of vacancies. You can go on the city website, and I believe the actual number of vacancies that's updated on the website, and I'm probably asking a question more than making a statement now.
I don't know if it's updated on the website,
Right. Okay,
but we have that information available at any time.
all right.
Click of a button.
And we want people, who will be, interested in a certain area. A lot of people want to give back to their community, but it's nice if you can give back in an area in which either you have a tremendous interest, special expertise, know-how, and would be willing to be an energetic member. We do get folks who sign up and are appointed to boards who unfortunately don't make many meetings, which cuts down the efficiency of the board. So most importantly, we need folks who will show up. Just you get any 8 people talking about something, eventually the right idea is going to come to the surface and people will act on it. But we need voices to make that conversation happen. Is there any action or discussion from the commission?
Mayor Davis, I move we approve resolution number 22-8063, appointing members to citizens boards, commissions, and committees.
Second?
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 6.2.
Item 6.2, discussion of city commission agenda order.
Mr. Scrake?
Yeah, I'm sure you're fully aware of the history of this, but I'll give you a quick rundown. On February 28th of this year, you passed resolution number 228027, which amended our prior resolution as related to our order of business, and we also took the opportunity at that time to make a clarification to rule number 16 related to motions to postpone. That's not necessarily at issue today, but just wanted to acknowledge that that was the other topic of the agenda, of the resolution. The amendment that was passed by resolution 228027 placed the topic of citizen forum as the 9th item on your agenda. The resolution spells out your order of business. It previously had been 3rd in the prior resolution. At the time that you passed that, you also made a motion to schedule review of this resolution and the effectiveness of the change for August 22nd of this year, which is today. So it's been returned to your agenda at your prior direction. There's no fiscal impact associated with this item. As far as actions that you could consider, you could take no action, which would leave the amended order of business in effect. You could make a motion instructing staff to prepare an amendment to resolution 228027, providing some alternate order, whether that's returning to the original order that was in place previously or some alternate order that you wish to propose. So with that, it's really a policy decision for you as the governing body. I know you deliberated on it back in February and have been mindful of it since that time. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for your deliberations. Be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. But as I said, it's really kind of a policy decision on your preference of leaving it in effect or taking some alternate approach.
Okay, I'll start with Commissioner Hoppick. Any thoughts, preferences?
Yeah, I have several comments. I don't know if you want them now or you want to wait till after we have public Public forum?
Your choice. We'll come back and discuss
Yeah,
again after.
well, I would like to hear the public comments first, and then I'll
All right.
give you my comments.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing to say ahead of time.
You want to bring it back for discussion?
Oh, we're going to bring it back for discussion. Yeah.
After the public?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's open this up for public comment.
Ben Winholt, Salina. Good afternoon, city commissioners, city staff, everybody behind me who has concern. In your packet, you have a two-page spreadsheet and a summary sheet. I apologize for it not being computer generated. I am illiterate when it comes to the computer, so what you see is what you get. Everything is handwritten. This is what you get when you get a self-appointed watchdog, because when this was brought up, it was my idea that and I'm going to ask for, plead for more than 3 minutes, because this is going to take a while for me. My suggestion at the time that this was discussed, that we'd move this to a 5:30 time slot. So what you see in your packet is based on 5:30. If you go to the summary sheet, you'll see that the number of forums were 21, because it started on 3/7 with the meeting moving to the end. During those times, and I actually have notes, so what you see on your sheets is just in the black and white. You may want to write these figures down as I come across with them. Forums that were before 5:30, of those 21 were 13. These were times where the commissioners and staff would have to wait until 5:30 arrived. The longest stretch having been for 1 hour and 14 minutes. So that would have been a 1 hour and 14-minute break for everybody. The shortest wait was 14 minutes. Forums after the 5:30, there were 8 of them. These were the times that the public forum would have taken place before the meeting ended, and it would have taken for around 5 before or after 5:30, whenever you could get an agenda break. The longest wait for citizens during this format was 1 hour and 58 minutes. This was after 5:30. We all had to wait 1 hour and 58 minutes for one of the meetings, and the shortest was 2 minutes after the 5:30. And that's all based on a 5:30 forum. There was debate during that, and if you go to the shortest forums, there was 2 of them. If there was not a forum, those were 0 minutes. So I have taken those out as far as the averages. The longest forum was 51 minutes long. The debate during your study session, or your talk about this when it was first changed, was that potential investors would have to wait because the forum would take up a lot of precious time. Yes, the longest meeting did take up 51 minutes. But the average forum length for all 21 forums, taking out the 2 that were 0, puts us down to 19, was 13.8 minutes long. That's the average. And on the flip side of that coin, citizens would argue, what about the citizens that have an investment in this community in the forms of real estate property and or sales tax? Don't they have the right to not have to wait for a potential investor to plead their case for a savings? Because most of the time when investors are up here, they're asking for some type of break. So with that being said, there were other arguments, but I don't want to get into it. So the average length of the total meeting for all of these 21 meetings was 2 hours and 6 minutes. And that was reflected by the fact that a few of those meetings went into executive session. So I am putting out there some options for you all to discuss. And number one, that would make the most sense, and not possible, possibly because of the way everything's been structured in the past, is move the meeting, the whole commission meeting, to 4:30 and the public forum to 5:30. This way, there's less break time of 30 minutes, in which the current time of 4 o'clock, if it's a short meeting. Number two option, move the meeting to 5 o'clock and the public forum to 5:30. You would always have your public forum at 5:30. This way, if you started your meetings at 5. With a 5 o'clock start, there's hardly any citizen in Salina or Saline County that would have an excuse for not attending a meeting and having their voice heard. If the meeting time generates more input from citizens because you move it to 5 o'clock, then the proposed neighborhood community meetings that have been discussed the last couple of weeks, being looked into right now, could possibly be just a couple with issues the citizens are dealing with that are too important to be discussed at a regular Monday meeting due to time constraint. This would be items such as the homelessness that we're going and the,
Try to
I'm getting, yeah.
Bring it home.
That's why I begged for, okay. Those could be brought up, of course, at your neighborhood. Number three option, if neither of the one or two options is of interest to the commissioners, then move the public forum back to the beginning of the 4 o'clock meeting. This way, all citizens will at least know the exact time to be there, if possible, to comment, complain, or praise what is important to that individual.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Chad Farber here in Salina. I was quite outspoken back when we discussed this earlier, back in February, I believe it was. Citizens do need an opportunity to voice their opinion to this commission, and I agree with some of the things that Mr. Windholtz was saying, moving the meeting back a little bit. I know that may be a little change in your schedule, but that would give citizens more opportunity to be off work and come in and voice their opinion. Again, and I do agree with what he said, if we're not going to move this and put it at a specific time in the meeting, let's go back and put it right at the beginning. That way all citizens know exactly what time to come and voice whatever they have to say to this commission. A set time would be good for all of the citizens here in our community. We've tried this out for 6 months, as you've seen, and Mr. Windholtz had a lot of information there. I was trying to absorb everything that he put out, but you can see that the Citizens Forum is not a huge amount of time that is being taken during this meeting, an average of 13 minutes, I believe he said. And let's give that back to our citizens, put a specific time for them to come, voice their opinion, and move on from there. If it has an adverse effect on investors or other people who are listed on the agenda afterwards, so be it, but let's serve our citizens here in Salina first. Thank you.
Norman Mantle, Salina. As Chad said, we need to let our citizens vote on these issues. If it affects us, we have a right to vote on it. You've seen what happened August 2nd. The people spoke. The people vote. We should be voting on every issue if it requires a vote, if it affects us. A democracy is when we, the people, are governed by the laws that we voted to be governed by. A dictatorship is a small group of people, a gang, if you will, who are led by a gang leader who force their ideas, their views on the people. We come that close in January of having a dictator. January 6th, we come that close to having a dictator. We've got to bring democracy back and let the people vote. You know what they do to dictators? Look up Nikolai Ceausescu.
Rosemary Mice, Salina, Kansas. I agree with Ben and Chad that we need to either move it back to where it was at the beginning of the meeting or change the time of the meeting so that people do know what time we will be having that public forum. Because right now, if the meeting is over before 5:30, then if somebody gets off of work and wants to come and voice their opinion, they get here and there's nobody here. Like last week, Monday, we were done at 5 o'clock and the public forum was scheduled at 5:30. So it wouldn't have done anybody any good to come up here and voice their opinion.
Sherry Harp, Salina. My boss would just appreciate so much if I could give her a time that I could go to the public forum. So she's worked with me a lot. First, I said I needed off at a few minutes before 5 to be here by 5:30. And then I told her, well, I need to get off at 4. So she's worked with me there. So it would have, I would like it, as Ben has suggested, if you could start it at 5 and allow the people to be here by 5:30. It would work better for my work environment and for other people who work. I work the first part of the week, and so I hate to fluctuate my hours with her an awful lot, but it does benefit me personally for people who work and get off at 5, so that I don't have to take off an hour early at 4 to make the 4:10 meeting that you did earlier. So, yeah, thanks a lot.
Evening, Mark Labus, Salina, Kansas. I know this commission previously, be it you guys or previous, decided not to move the meetings. Now we're talking about timeframes for public forum. The more we look at this over time, it's more like you guys don't want public forum. You want to silence the people so you guys don't have to hear our concerns. So keep it a set time, move the meeting, whatever you want to do. But the more you look at it, you guys don't want public interest in it.
Anyone else? Okay, bring it back. I'm sorry, is there anyone online, Jacob? Okay. All right, start from the left again.
Okay. I'm a little bit like Ben. I have a spreadsheet, so I'm like you, Ben. I'm computer challenged sometimes. One of the things that stuck to me is I kept track of the times, but I also kept track of the number of individuals that came up to talk during the open forum. So there's basically 64 presentations. 45 of those came from 5 people. So 71% of those that came forward were for 5 people. I think the telling point is, and I'll look to my other commissioners, but of the 50-some thousand people in Salina or Saline County, I had no other phone calls or complaints from anyone about the fact that we have moved the meeting. I talked to Mr. Winholtz one day, and he said, you know, it was our duty to hear the people, and I agree with that 100%. But I think the important thing of this commission is to conduct the business of the city. And I've got to be honest with you, I personally feel like the meetings have flowed better. I feel like they've been more professional. I'm all for leaving the citizens forum at the end. We got a letter today from a concerned citizen I think we all received. You know, this is 2022. We can be emailed if people have concerns with anything. We can also Zoom in or call into the meeting. So I think that the new format has worked well, and I'm willing to leave it where it is.
Commissioner Lankiewicz.
I don't have much to add to that, except for I will offer the comment that it seemed like there's a little bit of a theme of we don't want to hear what everybody has to say. It's my understanding there's there's city commissions and councils around the country that don't have a public forum. And if we were truly of that mindset, we would offer up that suggestion. Instead, we've just moved it. And like, it seems like anything with change, people get uncomfortable, they eventually adapt, but it's not about wanting to hear or not hear your voice. I mean, it's a forum that's being offered, it's just at a different time of the meeting. So I'm not sure where the idea that we're just completely shutting down citizen feedback altogether just seems a little disingenuous and intellectually dishonest.
Commissioner Ryan.
I would agree with the prior two comments, and just so not to repeat them, we don't have to have citizens forum, but we do have citizens forum. The important thing for us is that we were elected to do the business of this city, and that's what's paramount to me. And I would just put it out there to those few that are very engaged with wanting to be in the podium as opposed to be on an email with us or on online with us, that it's very easy for a discerning person to look at the agenda and take a pretty fair shot at where that citizens forum time is going to come down. And if you got something important on your mind and it's of a timely manner, you can certainly address that to the staff immediately and not have to wait to give it to the city commission. And if it's not suiting your schedule to come and address us directly, you can address us at another meeting or personally. So I think the way we've put it now works quite well, and I'm in favor of staying with it.
I have a little different take and view on this. First of all, my time here seated on the commission, I have been very disappointed in the lack of interaction and communication with the citizens. I know it's been broadcast out there, our email address, and as Commissioner Hoppick said, there's plenty of ways to communicate, and I just, for the life of me, don't know why people don't utilize that more. And I would agree with Commissioner Hoppick. I do think the meetings have flowed a little smoother. You know, part of the gist of moving this to the end of the forum was when there was negative issues and upset people. It just kind of put a dampener on the meeting. And so in that respect, I think being at the end of the meeting has been a benefit. I still would like to see a set time of at the end of the meeting or 5:30, whichever comes first, have the citizens forum. And I would also entertain, if we're going to stay at the end of the meeting, if you read the rules, it's 3 minutes, no interaction with the commissioners. To adjust those rules, extend that time, and encourage interaction. We've talked about having a public forum outside of the meeting, and this could fulfill that need. But I think that if people could freely interact with the commission instead of having their 2 minutes and 50 seconds and done, maybe we'd get more people involved and more people take interest. So that's where I'm at. I would still propose having the forum at the end of the meeting or at 5:30, whichever comes first.
Okay, well, I guess I was one of the folks who didn't want to move it at first because I thought more people were saying they couldn't get off work by 4 o'clock to get here for the meeting. And now, and the danger in that was that, yeah, it'll be at the end of the meeting, you'll be off work, but we can't guarantee you what time it's going to start. I have some former mayors on either side of me and probably some out in the audience. From the pure point of running a meeting, it can be very difficult to say that you're going to stop in the middle of something at a certain time. We might be in a hearing, we might be discussing budget, we might be discussing something very important where you need to have that conversation flowing. Or we may have to say, ooh, there's a topic that's going to take 20 minutes. Well, let's not do anything for 15 because 5:30 is coming up. It sounds good, but it can be very difficult to do. The danger for us as far as having it at the end of the meeting is not that we are stifling community input. We run the risk of actually inviting more than we ever wanted to hear. Why? Because you're here for every item on the agenda. So we run the risk of having 20 people who want to talk at the end of the meeting, talking about 8 different items. I mean, there's a risk that we are artificially extending the meeting. And you do have the opportunity to talk about any item that's on the agenda. We don't take a vote until we've had citizen comment. So for agenda items, there's always the opportunity. And if it's at the beginning of the meeting, you know to come early. If it's at the end, you can turn on your TV or your computer if you want to zoom in. And yeah, you kind of have to guess, but you know whether to rush over or take your time coming. We're not going to, it's just like organizations that meet on Sundays. Well, attendance is down because churches run late. Then you do it on Fridays. Well, there's football game. You do it on Wednesdays. There's church night. There's never going to be a perfect time. My fear in starting meetings late at night is in the wintertime, when it gets dark, older people won't want to come out. And again, there's no perfect time. From running the meeting, from this chair here, really doesn't make any difference to me. I'm just here to make sure the meeting, not just, but one of my jobs here is to make sure the meeting flows. And I can juggle the agenda items any way it turns out, but it's a matter of which is the worst of the evils. What's more important, that you have a chance to get here, or that you get here early and get out? Because even with Citizens Forum, you could talk for 45 minutes. We still have a whole meeting to go. Now, we were mindful in that we don't have any executive sessions before, unless it's just a short 5-minute one procedurally during the meeting. But the ones we plan, we don't do those before Citizens Forum. So there's, if there was just one item to decide, it'd be real easy. The meetings have gone smoother. Commissioner Hoppick may have answered something that I was going to ask Mr. Winholtz about. You had the number of minutes spent in Citizens Forum, but not the number of people who spoke. And we don't always hold the 3 minute. I mean, if there are only 4 people in the room, we don't have to stick really to the 3 minutes rigidly if we're getting good conversation. If there are 30 people who want to talk on something, yeah, the 3 minutes becomes a little more important. And that's why you'll see that, I let that thing ding and that you keep talking if you look like you know where you're going and you're going to get there. But depending on the topic, Citizens Forum has been known to go an hour and 15 minutes or longer. And some days our agenda's not that exciting and nobody comes up. And you look at the agenda and you say, Yeah, but even then, if they were coming for the agenda, they would have spoken when that item was addressed in the agenda. So there's some days that, everything's going well. So I don't know if there are any other comments or any?
Well, I would like to see if I have any support from the rest of the commission on adjusting these rules. Here, the time period, typically 3 minutes, may be altered. Speakers should not engage in two-way dialogue with the commission. Okay, last week, Mr. Welsh was here with an issue, and it didn't seem to be a problem to have a dialogue with him. So
a certain amount of dialogue is allowed. I mean, there are the rules. We don't sit up here, and if you were to come up here and ask, why is Santa Fe torn up? Why are all those bricks torn up? We're not going to sit here stone-faced and not give you an answer. I mean, some things we kind of have to respond to, and usually, if we don't know the answer, all 5 of us will look at the city manager, hoping and praying that he knows the answer. So, yeah, I agree. It does say that, but we don't want to get into extended debates.
Yeah, have limits.
Yeah.
And it would have to be civil. But I think it would encourage people to be more apt to come with an issue and not be afraid that I'm going to have 3 minutes here, I better get it right, and I'm done.
Well, the advantage of 3 minutes is that when you're home preparing those 3 minutes, you write it, you rewrite it, you rewrite it. Some things that I'll say that will take a minute and a half, that's my 17th version that people hear. And I see Reverend Farber laughing, and I'm sure he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Be succinct, because what you say, like last week, and I hope we have some answers for this week, issues brought up, give the administration task. I mean, there's information we need to find out. We're not going to always have ready answers that evening, but we hope to come back. So if you can button it down into a nice little package, there's something that city manager and the department heads can work with.
Mayor, I just add to that, and I'm not in favor of altering the rules. I think you've spoken to it directly that there's a cap, and that's important to have, but it's also at the discretion of the chair to allow leeway. And the other part of getting into too much discussion, I mean, the point is that for us to receive information and be alerted to things and staff aware of it, but if we get into too much discussion, that's not fair to the rest of the public. The item should be put on the calendar and discussed, put out on the calendar as a topic of discussion, and then so that the community can participate in it, not that we just hash it out on the fly right here in front of we 5 commissioners and the 4 or 5 people who usually like to speak to us.
And when you get these, we get called blue sheets up for obvious reason. But, department heads have done research. They're presented to the city manager. If it's not to his standard, he sends them back. I mean, what you get is a polished product. And to answer some of these questions require a lot of work. And while we sometimes are given credit for it, we don't do 98% of that work. We hope that we can read it and decide if it makes sense and ask questions. But the real nitty-gritty work is done by the department heads and the city manager and his staff. So if you bring us the idea or the problem, those are the folks, we're your go-between between you and the city administration.
And one thing to add is, just because we don't have a back and forth here doesn't mean that we haven't heard the voice of the public. There's times that I know city staff or legal counsel has made notes. Same way, I know we all meet with city staff, with the city manager once a week, and something that's come up at open forum may be discussed or brought up also with city staff. So just because we're not having a debate when someone comes up here, I hope they don't feel like it's falling on deaf ears, I guess would be one thing to say.
And we do take a lot of notes during citizens forum. And one of the reasons we don't open our mouths into a debate is because we may have to read it the next morning and say, I didn't like the way that sounded. So it's better that we use these than this during the citizens forum.
Mayor, I'd like to add that in my time here, and I've noticed that you're very intuitive about when there is public comment about not being regimented. If case in point, Mr. Winholt's comments, is obvious is going to go over. It wasn't a hard, that's your deadline, that's it. If there's somebody that needs a little bit of time, you've been very accommodating, to your credit. So
thank you.
To me, it doesn't feel like we really need to necessarily facilitate more interaction and feedback, just based on my experience with you running the meetings.
Thank you. Well, if we do nothing, it stays as it is. If we want to change it, we have to make a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion to instruct staff to prepare a resolution amending Resolution 22-8027, providing direction about an alternative order of business to be adopted.
Just a point of order for the city attorney. Does that direction have to be included in the motion?
That would be best, but I'm not trying to thwart where
Because otherwise it's kind of,
commissioner, where the commission might be headed,
because it's kind of
in terms of
vague.
progress,
just open-ended
in terms
like
of
that.
arriving at your, the position of the majority, whatever assists you to get there is certainly in order.
I offered that wording not knowing what the ultimate direction you might choose, just trying to kind of lay the groundwork. So if there's clarity about, and it certainly doesn't have to be verbatim, if you can give us direction on
Yeah,
what you have
I
in mind,
think
then
I
we
would
can
add
draft
to that
between
motion,
now
the
and then.
direction would be to have a little more free dialogue with the commission.
Okay. Okay. Not hearing a second, so that motion will die for lack of a second. Any other motions? Okay, we will take no action on 6.2 and progress to development 7.1.
Item 7.1, Aero Plains Addition. Item 7.1A, consider acceptance of the offered right-of-way easements and restricted access dedications from Storage Mart LLC to serve the proposed Aero Plains Addition, a 170-lot subdivision of a 53.26-acre tract of land located on the east side of Centennial Road between Schilling Road and Magnolia Road. And item 7.1B, approve ordinance number 22-11107 on second reading, changing the zoning classification of this property from A1 to R2.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. The proposed Aero Plains Addition is a residential development that is located in an undeveloped area on the east side of Centennial Road. It's located between Schilling Road and Magnolia Road. It's approximately 220 feet east of Centennial Road, and it's about 1,600 feet north of Schilling Road. As proposed, this 53-acre area would be subdivided into 170 residential lots for future townhome development. All of the housing units proposed would be 2-unit townhomes. The lots would be accessed from a network of internal public streets. The only external access is from a single public street, which would extend westward across Airport Authority property and connect with Centennial Road. The Planning Commission and City Commission have taken a number of reviews and taken action on a number of aspects of this project. The first to occur was the annexation of the property into the city. That occurred in February of this year. On April 4th, 2022, you approved an ordinance on first reading changing the zoning classification of this property to R2, with second reading held until the property was final platted. The Planning Commission has reviewed and approved preliminary and final plats of the property. As I noted, Storage Mart has obtained access across a vacant tract of land owned by the Salina Airport Authority to provide direct street access to Centennial Road. To provide a second means of emergency access as required by the fire code, the developers are proposing to construct an emergency access road that would extend from the north end of Foxborough Drive across the flood control levee and into the subdivision. There is an opportunity for future street connections, and those have been identified on this drawing. And so in the northwest corner, this has been designed so that there could be a future street connection to the north and east over to Virginia Drive. There's an opportunity here for a street connection up to Magnolia Road. There's also an opportunity to construct a road that would extend back to Centennial Road in that alignment. There's a number of challenges and existing design constraints that affect this property. As you can see from the map, it's essentially landlocked. It's bordered by stream channels on the west and east. There's a city flood control right-of-way here along the south. There's a former rail line that runs along the west side. Also along the west side is a 35-foot easement for an existing Evergy transmission line. There's also an interceptor sewer line that crosses the property, and we have a pump station right here related to that. And there is a gas pipeline that crosses the property from south to north. And so all of those things had to be taken into account in the design of that subdivision. The gas pipeline easement was originally a blanket easement. The pipeline company asserted the need for a 110-foot wide easement. We've since found a document that they had reduced the width from a blanket to 50 feet, so that will be a 50-foot easement that will be in the backyards of a row of lots. And so as to the emergency access, one of the things that was done between the preliminary and final plat was that the city engineer looked into whether the levee section north of Foxborough Drive could be lowered or eliminated. And the city's floodplain mapping consultant determined that that could be done without diminishing flood protection or changing flood maps. So instead of the original design of having a fire access road that went up and over the levee, that can be done at a more level grade. And so one of the things we wanted to point out was, because of the proximity of Foxborough Drive to the entrance on the west, it's not sufficiently remote to provide the access to the entire subdivision. So the plan is to develop this in phases, and phase one will run right along this line, and then there would be a requirement that one of these future public street accesses be in place before they could move on to phase two. And so the developers are aware of that, and they've been having contact with adjoining owners, and even though that's not within their control, they are making efforts to secure that permission to extend roads to the north out of this subdivision. All of the streets in the subdivision would be public streets. As you can tell, they have an aeronautic or flight theme to the names. We have 170 building lots, 11 blocks, and over here along the west side of proposed Tim Rogers Lane, these townhomes will have to be set back an extra distance from the street because there is a Evergy transmission line that runs parallel to that street. So the setback on those lots will be 41 feet instead of the standard 25. As part of the Menards project, there was a benefit area that was created for water and sewer improvements, and there's a 12-inch water line that runs along this north edge of the property, and there's a benefit fee associated with connecting to that line, which is $115,000, and that will have to be paid as part of this development. Sanitary sewer This blue line right here represents that this was the initial benefit district for Menards, and then this area in red is the benefit area of other properties that benefited from those improvements. And so there's a water line that comes down and ties over, and so the proportionate share of the cost of that line is $115,000 attributable to this property. The subdivision will be served by a gravity sewer that will drain over to this corner and go into this line. And this will be in the south, high, south middle, and Schilling Elementary School districts. There is a plan to place electric lines underground. Transformers are in short supply, and one of the discussions about the availability of transformers was the location of those transformers. And at the Planning Commission meeting and in further meetings with the applicant, they do plan to put the transformers in the backyard area, and that will allow a transformer to serve multiple units by placing them there. So the plan is to use the rear yard easements for the transformers. Centennial Road was improved in 1995 and meets the city's current public street standard. The only geometric improvement they need to make as part of this subdivision is to add a left turn for southbound traffic on Centennial Road. And so as part of that intersection redesign, Centennial Road will be converted to 3 lanes with a dedicated left turn lane for traffic entering the subdivision. At the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant confirmed and has submitted design plans so that the road exiting the subdivision will have dedicated left turn and right turn lanes at Centennial Road. The only other thing we would note about access, just prior to the Planning Commission meeting, we determined that the Smoky Valley Winery that has property on Centennial Road doesn't have their own curb cut. They have an access easement from the Salina Airport Authority that covers part of this area along the north. So the applicant and their designers have shifted the road coming out to Centennial Road so that it's at the southern portion of this tract, and that would allow the access to the Smoky Valley Winery building to be maintained. As far as the easements and dedications, again, you'd be accepting all the public right-of-way in this subdivision as public streets. There is going to be public utility easements both in the rear and a few along the front. For instance, these lots have the sanitary sewer in the back, so they'll be served from the front, so there'll be utility easements front and back. They do plan to use the rear easements to convey stormwater as well. I don't know if you've been out to some of the subdivisions, Stone Lake and some of the others have put concrete drainage flumes in the rear area. So what you generally have is you have the concrete flumes on one side of the easement and the transformers on the other side, and they share that 20-foot easement. The applicants have indicated that they plan to pay a maintenance fee to the city and to dedicate their detention pond for future city maintenance. So phase 1 would consist of 75 lots and construction of the interim emergency access road. Phase 2 would consist of 94 lots and would not be allowed until there was a second public street connection. We did note that there's no special assessments associated with this because Aero Plains received approval to form a rural housing incentive district to finance their infrastructure. So in terms of the city's maintenance obligation, the city would maintain public streets, public water and sewer lines following acceptance, and if the developers dedicate the detention pond, then the city would accept maintenance responsibility for that. On the 2nd of August, the Planning Commission voted 5-0 to approve the final plat, subject to a number of conditions. 14 different conditions. I would call attention to page 11, condition number 4 requires that a second public street connection to an existing public street meeting the remoteness criteria in the fire code shall be made prior to any development occurring in Phase 2. The wording on that may not have been as clear as it could be, but the term, as understood by the developers and by the Planning Commission, is that development refers to the issuance of building permits for construction of new homes in Phase 2. So no permits would be issued in Phase 2 until there is a second public street connection. Your options this afternoon would be, if you concur with the action of the Planning Commission, a motion should be made to accept the offered right-of-way, easement, and restricted access dedications and authorize the mayor to sign the plat on behalf of the city. In the alternative, you could decline to accept the offered dedications and return this plat to the Planning Commission, stating your reasons for not wanting to accept the dedications as proposed. So we added a lot of maps and drawings to your packet, hopefully to make things as clear as we could, but we'd be open to any questions that commissioners might have.
Mayor Davis, before you get into questions and comments, I'd like to recuse myself just because of a potential conflict.
Okay. All righty. Start from this end, this side. Questions?
Yeah, how many units was it going to be in Phase 1 to where they would be required to do another access point?
There are 75 lots in Phase 1. In your packets, there is a map in there that shows the Phase 1 and Phase 2 boundaries. So there's 75 lots in Phase 1, and those 75 lots can be served with the single street access and the interim emergency access from Foxborough, and then the balance, essentially Fawcett Lane, Neil Armstrong Lane, Aldrin Lane, and Yeager Lane could not be developed with housing until there was that second street connection.
Okay, and I remember a number when we heard this about the RHID that they asked for a minimum number depending on how the market was. Do you recall what that was?
A minimum number relating to how many they have to
Required builds.
I don't know. We have Mr. Hobby here for representing the applicant. They may recall what that number was, but I don't recall what was in the RHID agreement.
Yeah, just follow up to one of his questions. For the second street for Phase 2, is it going to be one of those 3 potential roads that I think was in gray on the map? But
Yeah, those would be, so
would any one of those satisfy?
Mr. Sponder, with One Vision, has bought the property to the north.
Okay.
He would like to see that also developed as a subdivision, and he is working with the developers of Aero Plains and has expressed a willingness to provide right-of-way corridor to have street access to Magnolia. So that might be the most promising. The other route, the affected owners are Smoky Hill Construction, which they have expressed willingness to provide a corridor for a street, and the city of Salina owns the other section of that, so that is a possibility. And then if the various projects that have been proposed south of Menards happen, then Virginia Drive is going to be extended, and that presents a possibility to tie in with Virginia Drive. So those are all not within the control, or the timing's not in control of the applicants, but they understand that.
Okay. Didn't mean to catch up.
That's all I had.
I have
Commissioner
no
Ryan?
questions.
Commissioner Lenkowitz?
No questions.
Okay. And just one, The electric lines cutting across now, these aren't the high tension wires.
Yeah, the one on the west is a transmission line similar to what you see on Belmont Boulevard. So it's not a distribution line for a subdivision. It's a transmission line, and so they recently replaced the poles on that project. But it's not something that you would build a house or any structures under. So on that particular site, the homes will just have to be set back farther. But it roughly parallels the west side of the future street, so it's just going to be with taller poles and taller wires than what you would typically see.
So this is running through the Belmont or on the edge of it?
It is running on the edge of Tim Rogers Lane, which is the westernmost street in the subdivision.
Right.
So it will be in the front yard of those homes that are on Tim Rogers Lane.
That's what my brain kept coming up. Is that sightly? I know we're not judging sightliness here, but.
Well, it's not the only, we have homes on Wildcat Circle, and they have the same high voltage line that comes from Belmont through there. We have the Wheatland Valley Addition. It's on the east side of Markley Road, and at the south end of that, we have the same high voltage transmission line going through the backyards. The main thing that's unique here is it's kind of overhanging the edge of the street, so it's going to be in front of the homes and not in back. But I've been out to homes on Wildcat Circle, and they have the high transmission lines running over their backyards there.
Has the railroad vacated those tracks?
The railroad has abandoned those, and the properties reverted back to these owners. So that it's abandoned
still
by
there,
the
though?
railroad. The tracks are gone.
Tracks are gone.
Yeah.
I'm asking more from education here. Any recent data on safety in living under those?
Well,
The information I can think of right now is
they have
decades
a
old, but-
clearance. The easement's 35 feet wide, and then they have restrictions about what can be placed under them. So we're not going to have any trees or structures or anything like that that will be under the lines.
Well, it was the people under the lines that I was concerned
Yes.
about, but.
I mean, all electric wires emit some electromagnetic waves. That's substations do, regular power lines do, and transmission lines do.
So in the houses with the 50-foot easements, they still have usable yard?
Yes, when it was 110 feet, which was the pipeline was insisting on early on, that created some challenges. It will be a challenge for those people because they're 140-foot deep lots, so they're plenty deep. It's just there's going to be limits to what those lot owners can do back there because they're not going to be able to place outbuildings or things over the pipeline. And so the important thing is that it's clearly marked and that people know what is there. And I know the pipeline company intends to do that.
Okay.
But the subdivision to the south on the west side of Foxborough Drive, that same pipeline is there. And so the buildings that are on the west side of Foxborough Drive are just pushed a little farther back from the street for those same reasons. So I know that I have Mr. Hobby here and Ms. Driscoll is here. They may have the specifics on the RHID. I don't have those numbers in front of me about how many homes they're supposed to build within a certain period of time in phase one.
Mr. Hobby, if you wanted to add anything, you certainly can.
Thank you. I'm Gary Hobby from the City of Salina and representing Building Kansas LLC. The goal with the RHID in the beginning was to have 75 building lots into phase one, which is included in what Dean has already presented to you today. Of those 75 lots, we would build a duplex on each lot, so there would be 150 completed units when we're all done with phase one. Our goal is to build those out in a 3-year period, so we have suggested and agreed with the city that we will build 50 units per year for the next 3 years. So in Phase 1, there'll be 150 units there. Phase 2 gets into 94 additional lots, so it'll be a separate issue totally with potentially a second RHID in that area as well.
Yep.
Questions?
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good example of a short elevator speech, right to the point. Okay. No, I was saying that was a good example of how you have your stuff prepared and just ready to go. Yeah. Any other, I'll turn over to citizens' comments.
Norman Mantle, Salina. Have any of you got any vision of the future? Ever thought about it? Have you looked at that land out there? You're covering up some of the best agricultural producing land in the United States. It produces food. In California, they are abandoning land. They've abandoned over 300,000 acres that is not going to produce your vegetables. Some of it will never come back into production. And you're covering this up out there. So be very careful before you approve this to be developed. Because I like to eat. So do you. We're running out of food. And you're covering up the best farm ground there is in the United States. They look at this land back here. And they say, why are you covering this up? Do you know? You don't want to answer, do you? I get the same answers from the Fish and Game Department. I go to Fish and Game Department meetings. I says, do you have jurisdiction over this land? They won't verbally answer me. I said, how can we produce food?
Carol Reed, Salina. I just wondered the cost on these per unit. Are these, I guess I haven't caught up with what's going on.
I'll write that down and we'll get the developer to come back up and
Okay.
answer that. All right.
Mark Labus, Salina. I've actually already been out there and walked that. That's pretty much already been tracked as far as marked already for plats and everything. As far as the railroad tracks go, right off of Magnolia, there is a set that runs to the, I think it's a concrete plant right there. That is still in use, where the oil tanks used to be for the Shilling Air Force Base. That's still in use completely. Now, once you go south, past that a little bit, yes, the railroad tracks are unusable, but you still have that right there. Another consideration, I'm not an expert when it comes to, when it comes to the levees and water, but I know in 93 that entire area was flooded. To developing that without dikes and all of that, that doesn't make any sense. We're still due for a 100-year flood.
Okay. Mr. Hobby, coming back up, if you could address the cost, and I'll ask Mr. Andrew if you could just, come on up, Mr. Hobby. Later address the thoughts and the plans that went into the flood protection after that.
And the question was?
The typical cost of a unit in the development.
Cost of each unit. We're anticipating with the increased costs of materials and labor that has happened about 20 to 30% increase. We still want to stay in that under 250 range for each unit. So our goal is to be at 249.9 or somewhere in that neighborhood. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bath, as well as a 2-car garage for each unit. So.
All right. Thank you. I wonder if that gave you enough time, Mr. Andrew.
I don't know if even if Mr. Wood could put up one of the plat layouts or an aerial photo, I can kind of illustrate for you where the the floodplain is. There is, this is Dry Creek. There is a floodplain associated with that. Basically, the floodplain corresponds to the tree line there on either side of that, so it's a narrow floodplain. And there is one lot right in the southeast corner here that by elevation is in the floodplain. But what they've done is they've created a area here on the east side of this street that's just common area that's going to be left as green space and not be development lots. And so they have a total of one lot in their subdivision that is in the floodplain. And the rest of this they're leaving as common area, open space. And what happens is, as you get up here, this box that's underneath Magnolia is not large enough, and there's a constriction up here at the interstate, so when it floods, the water backs up. But according to the flood map, it backs up into this area right here. So this property has some floodplain on it, but down through here, the floodplain is basically equal to the width of the channel. So the flooding event occurs from backwater up here, and that backwater does not, according to the flood models, doesn't get back into this area. It stays up in here. So of the layout on the plat, there's only one lot right here that's in the floodplain. And if you look at the plat layout, they have some common area on the east side of that easternmost street. So they're leaving what floodplain there is in their subdivision undeveloped. So maybe if we can... So along here, this right here is common area. It's not building lots, and there's one lot right here that's floodplain. But basically, this shaded area here is the mapped floodplain for that area.
And the one that's in the floodplain will be built on?
They are able to elevate that with, they can use compacted fill and elevate that so the floor elevation is above the 100-year flood elevation, and then they can build on that lot as long as the floor elevation is 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation.
Right, and are there any plans to alleviate the constriction in the creek further north?
Hopefully that will be part of the West Magnolia Improvement Project to improve those flows. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I think we're ready for any action if there's going to be any.
Mayor, I move we accept the offered right-of-way easement and restricted access dedications and to authorize the mayor to sign the plat on behalf of the city.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the offered right-of-way easements and restricted access dedications from Storage Mart LLC to serve the proposed Aero Plains Addition. I'll stop there. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And does Commissioner Hobbit need to recuse for the second?
I assume so. I haven't had a conversation with him, but I assume so.
Okay, we'll leave him out. All right, let's go 7.1B then.
Seven point 1B, approve ordinance number 22-11107 on second reading, changing the zoning classification of this property from A1 to R2.
Trent, this was, that's right, this was passed on first reading before. I guess it's not easy to see if he voted on it first time. But
Yeah, it might be best just to ask
In our
him
minutes?
his intentions.
okay.
I don't recall if Commissioner Hoppick recused himself on this.
Yeah, I have recent notes with me, but not back to April.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, this ordinance was passed on first reading on April 4th, 2022, with the second reading held in abeyance until the property was final platted. The final plat was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission on August 2nd, 2022. Any questions, concerns, comments from the commissioners?
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 22-11107 on second reading.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance.
Any public comment on that at all?
Well, probably wouldn't hurt, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? It's not as easy as it looks. All right. Okay.
Roll call.
It's been, moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-11107. Will I have a vote by roll call, please?
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Davis.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0, and we should ask Commissioner Hoppick to come back as he is. Thank you. All right, 7.2.
Item 7.2, consider renewal of the certified local government agreement between the City of Salina and the State Historic Preservation Officer, allowing the Salina Heritage Commission to retain its current responsibility for performing National State Register project review under the State Historic Preservation Act.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Since 1996, the City of Salina has been what in the state of Kansas is referred to as a certified local government. And a certified local government, there's about a dozen of them in the state of Kansas. And there's certain criteria that have to be met in terms of staffing and having a Historic Preservation Commission or Heritage Commission. And the Certified Local Government Agreement allows the local authorities to review projects that directly affect a National Register of Historic Places or Register of Historic Kansas Places property. And so if this is the agreements that have been done have been in 5-year intervals, and so you can see that the agreement was renewed in 2001, 2007, 2012, and most recently in 2017. The current agreement we have is expiring, and so it's up for consideration of renewal. If the agreement is not renewed, then the City Planning Division would be obligated to forward National and State Register project information concerning local activities to the State Historic Preservation Office for their review and evaluation. And under state law, they would have to review that and notify the city before those projects could proceed or permits could be issued. So I'll try to give you a couple of concrete examples. The Stiefel Theater is on the National Register of Historic Places. They had been in contact with the city about putting a electronic changeable copy sign as part of their marquee as a National Register of Historic Places building. And under the Certified Local Government Agreement, that proposed alteration to add that sign was reviewed locally by the Salina Heritage Commission. If this agreement was not in place, then the consideration of that sign would have had to been sent up to Topeka to the State Historic Preservation Office to wait on a decision from them before we could issue a sign permit. So that is an example of the local review that could be done locally. If the former St. John's Hospital is on the State Register of Historic Places, if there are proposals that involve alterations or demolitions of portion of that building, if we have a certified local government agreement, then we would perform those reviews locally. If we don't have an agreement, then any modifications to the former St. John's Hospital would have to go up to the state for review. So the purpose of this agreement is it allows for a local review and local decision-making instead of referring it up to Topeka. And then as part of the package and part of the agreement, there's an agreement on minor project types that can occur that staff can approve administratively without taking them to the Heritage Commission, and those are attached as an exhibit to your packet here. But there's certain things that staff can simply approve administratively without taking to the Heritage Commission. So we have found that keeping the reviews local, we can control the timing, we can provide better scheduling for applicants in terms of being able to answer when they will get a decision, as opposed to the unpredictability of sending it up to the state for review. The state actually likes the certified local government program because it reduces their workload at the state level. So since the agreement has taken place, originally one of the largest and most important changes that has occurred is in 2013, the state legislature eliminated what was called Environs Review. And so under the Environs program that the state of Kansas had, not only did the Heritage Commission review changes to registered properties themselves, but they also had to review every project that occurred within 500 feet of a National Register property. So, for example, the Salina Regional Health Center owns property, almost all their properties within 500 feet of the Prescott House or the Masonic Temple. And so during the 1990s and early 2000s, virtually everything the Salina Regional Health Center did was reviewed by the Heritage Commission because it was within 500 feet of those National Register properties. That has been eliminated, so now the only thing that is reviewed is changes to the historic properties themselves. So we have provided you with a list, and then I printed from the state website, so you had color photographs to go with it, but the listing of those properties in the city of Salina that are on the National Register of Historic Places. There have been a number of properties added in recent years, and the motivation for adding your property to the National Register of Historic Places is so that you can avail yourself of federal and state tax credits. So there's a 25% federal credit and a 20% state credit. So you can essentially, that would assist with financing 45% of a project. So Brian Richardson took advantage of that with his Norton Apartments project on East Iron and with the Lowell School project. So those are why those have been added most recently. And then Blue Beacon with their renovation of the National Bank of America building, that was added in 2020 also, again, so that they could avail themselves of the historic tax credits. So one of the things we noted is that any applicant who is dissatisfied with a decision of the Heritage Commission can appeal that decision to the City Commission, and even a general citizen who's dissatisfied with the decision of a Heritage Commission can appeal that to the City Commission. So the Heritage Commission recommended approval of a demolition permit for Hawthorne School, and a group of citizens got together and appealed that decision to the City Commission. The City Commission ultimately concurred with the Heritage Commission, and the Hawthorne School was demolished. But in those instances, the Heritage Commission decision is final, but there is an option for a dissatisfied party to appeal that decision to the City Commission. So your options this afternoon would be to authorize the city manager to enter into a new agreement and approve the list of administrative reviews as presented. You could return the agreement and the listing back to the Heritage Commission for suggestions for revisions. You could postpone consideration of the agreement renewal to a future meeting date to allow additional information to be provided, or you could disagree with the Heritage Commission's recommendation and decline to renew the agreement at this time. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have. I do think Mr. Wood was provided with a map of our 4 current historic districts, and I can put that up on the screen here. The city has 4 separate historic districts. We have the North 8th Prescott District, we have a South Highland District, a historic district that's the 800 block of South Santa Fe, and a historic district that's the 600 and 700 block of South Santa Fe. So within those districts, this agreement only deals with national and state register properties. The state doesn't have any involvement with just reviewing the things that occur in a district, but most recently the Heritage Commission concurred with the determination that the house at 619 South Santa Fe was a dangerous structure and approved the issuance of a demolition permit for that. That is the most recent case, and that house was located within that blue area just south of Prescott on the east side of the street. So basically, within the historic district, if there's a demolition proposal or some major change, it just gives notice to neighbors and an opportunity to be heard before that change occurs. So the districts were all formed in the early 1990s, and they were formed with petitions that were signed by the property owners that lived there asking that their neighborhood become a historic district. So with that, I'd be open to any questions about your options, or we can look at the maps if you want to look at them further.
All right, Commissioner Longby, question?
Did I hear you say St. John's Hospital was on this list?
St. John's Hospital is on the state register. The previous owners applied to put it on the national register, and they submitted an application. The Heritage Commission, City Commission endorsed their application, but the National Park Service wants to see the modern portions of the building removed before they'll put the remaining historic parts on the National Register. So the State Historic Preservation Office has put this former St. John's Hospital on the state register, but it is not on the National Register.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of teetering on a gray area there.
Well, it's
of a dangerous structure, eyesore, and everything else.
Yeah,
Yeah, from a code standpoint, it is secured and boarded up such that it's secure and not able to be accessed. But yes, it is not habitable at the moment, and we've been in conversation with multiple owners as ownership has changed about redevelopment plans, but nothing solid at the moment.
Commissioner Ryan? Nothing. Commissioner Lenkovic? All right. Any questions, concerns from the public? Come on up.
Carol Reed, Salina, Kansas. We still can't, I don't know if you guys are having trouble, but I can't hear your comments most of all, and I'm sitting right up front. So if you could keep your, but anyway, I want to make a plea for the Roosevelt Lincoln buildings. They're on South 8th, 245. I think are they on the list? Yes. You know, there is 60 units or somewhere about there that people rent. You know, in this town, you cannot find a good place to rent for some of these folks that are low income. Now, our mom lives there. She's been there 14 years. When they first redid it, I think in 2006, it said. Did a beautiful job. Did a beautiful job. I don't know what the problem is with that building, other than I know it does need new roofs. But you cannot, if a storm rolls through Salina, you never hear it. It is the quietest, best, most solid building in this town. And it's like 100, well, Mom's 102, and I think the building is same age as she is. It's a beautiful building, and the apartments are very nice, but they are not keeping them up. I don't know if it's, somebody said they need new roofs, and that was gonna cost $1 million, whatever it takes. Those buildings are good, and we definitely need, for lower income people, a place to stay. That's right there close to the buses when they pull up. They have good transportation. So I'd like to make a plea that somebody do something to save those buildings and keep they've got some that aren't rented because they're not redoing them because of the roof sometimes has leaked through, and whatever else the other problems are, I don't know. But please put that on your list to salvage those buildings.
Norman, Mount Salina. If you're looking for money, go out there to these people that got a lot of money that are giving it away. Bill Gates is giving the money away for projects like this. So is Mackenzie Scott. I don't know if this is just money in her divorce settlement. She got $480 million, and she's giving it to projects that you people are talking about. Is anybody looking for that? Silence, ain't it?
Well, I'll just say that didn't reach ESPN, which is one of the 3 channels I watch, but I'm sure there are grant writers here who will take your recommendation under advisement.
$480 million.
I was just going to make note that some of the financial challenges of some of the projects like the Pioneer President's Place, the Roosevelt Lincoln project, is that they used national historic tax credits, state historic tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, and the city's neighborhood revitalization tax rebate program to make that financially feasible to do all those renovations. So there's some times that developers have to do that. The downside of using the low and moderate income housing tax credits is in the housing is income qualified, and so it's limited to a certain segment of the population and not available for general rental. So.
We need that for those people.
Mark Labus, Salina. I've actually dealt with Heritage Commission. To be honest, I say let it go back to the state level because every single commission is appointed by this one. So what I've seen happen is whatever you guys will is what the commission does. It intends to overstep. I'd like to see some of that power be taken out of the city and put back to the state, personally.
Any other comments? Right, any action to be taken?
Mayor Davis, I move that we accept the recommendations of the Heritage Commission and authorize the city manager to enter into a new CLG agreement and approve the administrative review listings as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation of the Heritage Commission and authorize the city manager to enter into a new CLG agreement and approve the administrative review listing as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Any other business?
None from staff.
Okay, nothing, okay. Well, I'll go last. Any other business?
No.
Last week, there were some comments. I don't know if we have any update on the ability of tenants of an apartment building, like the one we just discussed, to make complaints about property invasion. Or does it have to be the owner? Can tenants call police? And
The police department has been in contact, or is attempting to make contact with the managers at Pioneer President's Place, both about kind of the overarching concern and the management's ability to lodge a complaint, as well as site improvements or site changes that might be able to be made to discourage some of those activities. But we haven't seen anything that authorizes a tenant to lodge a complaint. We're trying to coordinate with the owner and the management company.
All right, thank you. And at least there was some confusion in my mind. Could you explain the drink and open container ordinance that we have in Salina?
That's a fair source of confusion. It starts with state statute. There was, I think a comment was made last week as if we had adopted an approach that was intended to be favorable to restaurants. In Kansas, there's a distinction made between alcoholic beverages and cereal malt beverages, and so the average person doesn't make that distinction, but state statute does. But suffice it to say, our ordinance is consistent with state statute that makes consumption a violation, but an open container is not a violation at the moment. And so that makes it difficult from an enforcement perspective. You have to catch someone in the act. Police department and prosecutor's office are working together to review whether we have the opportunity or the authority to make our codes more restrictive and ban open container. If we did, we'd have to make necessary provision for street festivals and kind of that licensing process we already have in place. But I've tasked the police department and prosecutor's office to take a look at what our options might be to make open container a violation. If they find that that's within our authority, we'll bring that back to you for your consideration.
All right, thanks for that update, appreciate it. We will now move to the Citizens Forum, where anyone can come to the podium and address the commission. We'd like you to aim for the 3-minute mark, but we are a lenient body, but everyone
back.
wants to eventually stand up and stretch.
Linda Reynolds, I'm back. We got another violation notice now that my mural is bigger than 32 square feet. So it has to be rectified by this Sunday.
Could you, just for those who may not know the
building on
backstory,
the corner,
let people know what you're talking about?
the building on the corner over there. Reynolds Law Office. I don't understand, and I'm sorry I'm back here, but how does this 32 square feet, because it's above it, the 67401 on the side of the coffee shop is bigger than 32 square feet. Sharp up there on north of us is bigger than 32 square feet. I don't understand why the city is so focused on that sign. My gosh, who's pushing this? Can I find out who's pushing that? Tell me where to go to find out who's pushing it, to spend all of our taxpayer money trying to, I don't know what to do to us. John called and thought he'd be nice and said, we're looking into a mural, another mural being painted on the side of that building. They told him it has to be taken down by the 28th, or the city contractors will be out on Monday morning to paint over or take care of our building. So that gives us a total of 7 days to take care of that building. I can't believe there aren't more pressing matters that are out there than that. You know, I got to focus on this now rather than dealing with the homeless people that are coming into our office and telling me they're homeless, and I have to worry about my other staff members working in our office because they get a little nervous. I can take them on, but crying out loud, I've got homeless coming in and I have to worry about a dang sign on the side of the building. It's not a sign, it was a mural. It's signed by my granddaughter and I, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dalton McDowell, Salina. Sorry, I can't think. Oh, you guys are writing citations for invasive weeds. Have any of you as commissioners went down south and just look in the ditch line? Those ditches are so full of invasive weeds. It's got us landscape contractors trying to keep them out of our properties down south, which is next to impossible, because once you get bindweed in there, good luck getting it out. I know it's expensive, and I know there's several different ways you can do it. The best way is to round up your ditch lines about March, because it's all crap grass anyways, so it's not going to come out of dormant until April. It's all warm season. Round up it and kill all the weeds. Will come up in February, March. Round up it all, kill all the weeds off, and then keep them maintained. Because there's properties down there, and I'm not gonna state what properties. There's properties down there that have nice yards that are overran from weeds, bindweed, and a lot of your ditch lines are filled of them. There's chemicals you can spray to stop them, but once you get it infested, they don't have a chemical that will kill it completely, because it goes like 20, 30 feet in the ground sometimes. Is the end of the root case. You guys are on us to keep our properties clean and invasive weeds out. The county sprays for stuff like that. They'll come in and spray a field if it has invasive weeds. Why can't you guys maintain your own stuff, but you're wanting to write individuals for having the same weeds that you guys have in your ditch line? Kind of just seems kind of stupid to me. If you guys maintain your weeds, then yes, we should. But if you guys aren't going to maintain it, why write the property owners that are getting all these invasive weeds, mud thistles? I haven't seen many mud thistles in your ditch, but getting all these invasive weeds from the city right-of-ways. Something to look into. And then I did email a bunch of stuff to you, Mayor Davis, on something else.
Thank you. Judging by the city manager's hands typing away, this is being directed to the appropriate place.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
All right.
Mark Labus, Salina. Now, I know the city commission's worried about safety because they put that no right turn sign right next to the hospital. I've been around town. We have, just off the top of my head, about 10 intersections with no traffic devices whatsoever. And in fact, an accident had occurred, and I was almost in an accident at that same intersection, which happens to be between the railroad tracks and Broadway, Walnut, and, what's the other street? State Street. You've got at least 3 or 4 intersections on West Wilson Street from 9th Street clear down. You've got 2 or 3 on the north end of town over by Chuck's Bar that have no yield signs, no stop signs, no nothing. That's the accidents waiting to happen. Perhaps building services could spend some time figuring that out, or planning, one of the two. That's concern number 1. Concern number 2 is during the study session, you were talking about being able to do citations for vehicles and cars. I don't know what cities Mrs. Driscoll had worked in previously, but very few, if any, including Kansas City, allow their departments, their development services to issue citations. Another problem with that, just like, because I know you own rental property as do I. I have never seen a warning through the mail that came to me go to a tenant, ever. And I've gotten several because I've had to deal with them. So if you're going to cite someone, a landlord, because it's not going to go to the tenant, it's going to go to me. Sure. Then we have, the city only gives 10 days to correct something. Well, it takes by law 15 days to write out an eviction notice by state law, then 30 days if they decide not to fix it. Only on the second one can we initiate a 30-day eviction notice, as you well know. So to issue a citation, you're just going after landlords and landlords and landlords. And a lot of the problems that we have with affordable housing is because of the city. That's only part. Part of it's building costs, part of it is damages, but a lot of it has to do with the city, plain and simple.
Hi, I'm Jackie Hines, Director of Marketing at 24/7 Travel Store, and I'm with today Karen Couch. She's the Executive Director at the Salina Emergency Aid Food Bank, and we're going to try to change the energy here just a minute. We are announcing our upcoming 5th annual food bank fill-up, which is a fundraiser that we do to support the local food bank. 24/7 Travel Store actually does this to represent 9 Kansas communities. But here in Salina, we have 2 stores, and so it's actually a little bit more prominent. What we do is we match donations at each store. So for Salina, with 2 stores, we're going to match up to $10,000. That's $5,000 per store. And so we're just here to kind of promote and invite the citizens of Salina to help join us in this cause. And you know, altogether with our 10 stores, that's a goal of $100,000 to support 9 Kansas communities. And that's going to be during the month of September. And our motivation to do that is to participate in the Hunger Action Month, which is September. So, and you know, Karen is here with me. I'm going to let her speak a little bit more of some stats of where this money goes to that helps support the fundraiser. Or excuse me, the food bank.
Thank you, Jackie. So I just wanted to share with the commission today that the food bank is experiencing an increasing number of clients. We are having a situation where we're seeing double the number of senior citizens using our weekly grocery program. We've gone from feeding 327 people each week with our weekly grocery program last year. We're now feeding 509 a week. So that translates to distributing out more than 14,000 additional food items from our pantry every month. And in addition to that, we've already seen a drop of 30,000 pounds that we haven't been able to collect this year for the retail rescue program. So we're already facing a shortfall. So this kind of fundraiser throughout the month of September is critically important to making sure that we can keep pace with the demand. We encourage the city and our citizens to join us, especially on September 23rd. That's our Friday event. We're going to actually have staff and volunteers at both stores, and that is going to be an all-day in-person food drive, as well as you can bring in your monetary donations. I'll turn it back over to Jackie to promote it further.
So yeah, again, this is our 5th anniversary, and that's kind of the basis of our thing. We're doing a theme of 5, and we're just kind of encouraging the our customers to give 5 with 5 cents, 50 cents, $5, $50. And again, just recognizing that we're doing it for 5 years. And in the past 4 years, our efforts have raised $191,200 for the 9 Kansas communities. And just, sorry, if I may request a little bit more time. Those 9 Kansas communities would be the Salina area, Colby, Kansas, Waukene, Kansas, Maple Hill, Russell, and Hayes, Goodland, and McPherson. So those are the extending areas. And then for more information, you can go to our website, 24/7 Travel Stores, and we have a posting there in the news. So, and that's all we have for you. I did bring some little rack cards, if I may leave them.
Are you accepting just food and donations, or does a certain portion of the sales count towards that?
So to answer your question, during the month of September, monetary donations will be matched, that they must be made at the store. And that can be any of our 10 stores, but of course, whatever store you go to, that's going to be the local food bank that makes or gets the money. And then on September 23rd is the only day that we will be on site to collect actual food items. So for donations of that nature, on any other day, you'll just need to take them directly to the food bank.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that effort.
My name is Jerry Henriquez here in Salina. That'd be the telemarketers when they call me.
We'll take it.
I go to a lot of different coffee groups around town, and most of them are blue collar, calluses on their hands, grease underneath their fingernails. And they keep bringing up things about what's going on. And I want to address on the Salina Post, every day we have a story about theft, drugs, homeless issues, Salina shootings, and I witnessed it myself. My daughter, or my granddaughter and grandson was over by your mortuary, and we were taking pictures of the Catholic Church and the beautiful columns, and I had a homeless man come up and not only wanted to attack us, but verbally attack us, and that's not right. We have a lot of situations that are totally out of control, and people start saying, why are our police going to Reynolds' law office, taking down signs, when they should be taking care of issues on the streets? I mean, I just can't believe some of the things that our coffee group brings up. And I have coffee groups with a lot of different people, and they keep saying, my gosh, we got policemen taking down signs at Reynolds' law office when we have situations with this going on. The other thing is, I wanted to ask, and again, not to address you guys, but the art painted on West 5th Street, which I really think's cool, over by the Stiefel Theater, did they have to get approval for each drawing that they did?
That was coordinated with the Arts and Humanities Department, but I
So
don't
did
know
they
if there
get
was
approval?
permitting that was required.
Pardon?
I don't know that there was permitting that was required.
Yeah, so when they did their art, which I think it's cool, I like it, but did they get approval? Or that was kind of a free spirit thing that they did?
Yeah, I don't, other than coordination, I'm not aware that they.
Well, the only reason I ask, and I'm watching my time, I'm seriously thinking about donating some serious money about a mother and a little baby, saying value them both, and put them on the side of a building, and not yes, not no, no politics, but just having art. So who would I contact?
You're welcome to contact me. We'll go through the Development Services Department. There's,
because
the code that we need to look at is the sign code, and we'll have to figure out
Yeah.
exactly what your intent is and whether the sign code
Oh,
applies or not.
the intent is a little beautiful shot of a mother holding a baby, you know. So thank you.
Well, I too, Sherry Harp, I too would like to wonder why they're worrying so much about the Reynolds Law Office over here that all it says is vote yes. It could be vote yes for Trent Davis. It could be vote yes for Bill Longbine, but all it says is vote yes. I don't know what the big deal is because like she said, I went over there and looked at Sharp's drawing on the side of their building, and it is way much more art than what her little vote yes is. And I really think it has to do with the no group, only for the fact that why would they be so persistent with her over that? And she put that on her building because they kept tearing her signs down. And right now, it doesn't say vote yes for abortion. It just says vote yes. So the vote yes could be for anything. So I agree. Why are they going the extra mile to harass her? Because I really think they're harassing them, and I really don't think it's necessary to do that. So
Perhaps at an upcoming meeting, we could review the sign ordinance in Salina.
Yeah, we can, if you'd like, specific to murals and electioneering, I think are the two issues that are involved with this conversation.
That'd be a good idea.
And I would concur, this is on the level of harassment now.
I guess I need to intervene at this point. I'm not prepared to say that staff is harassing anyone. There's an electioneering statute that we have enforced historically prior to this election. There's Supreme Court cases on it. There's guidance given to county clerks and election authorities. There was communication prior to this election about this location and this topic. We frequently are expected to consistently and on a nonpartisan basis apply our codes, and that's what we did.
And as Mr. Henriquez stated, we have a lot bigger problems in Salina, Kansas.
If that's the threshold, we'll never accomplish what's expected of us.
My granddaughter and
Can speak from the back. I'm sorry. And you've already just 20 seconds.
I'm out of bounds. My granddaughter and grandson and I were verbally attacked, and my grand said, "Grandpa, I'm scared, I'm scared." And I said, "Don't be." And my granddaughter, who got a brand new 35 millimeter camera taking pictures of the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, they were scared. And we have homeless people threatening people downtown, and you have policemen taking down signs. Now, I don't buy that.
Did you file a complaint? Did you contact the police department about being harassed?
No, I didn't, and I should have, and shame on me for not.
Yeah, the expectation would be that the police department would address that.
My biggest fear is it could have got into an altercation because this individual was drunk and he was getting in my personal space, and my grandkids were scared. But shame on me, because I should have called the police. But now my question is, what will you do about it?
The police would respond to that complaint.
Well,
We'd take a complaint, we'd write a citation, we'd run them through court.
run a citation and run it through court.
That,
Thank you.
Mr. Mantle, come on up.
Yeah, Norman Mantle Slime again. After listening to these young ladies, they're just kind of backing up what I said. Instead of having economic development and building buildings, we better plant some food. And I've got another question. Whenever you have an issue that is being brought up that might require a legal opinion, do you ask your legal counsel, Mr. Bingston, for his opinion, one way or the other? You've hired the man. He will answer your questions. You're taking a lot of actions without consulting your attorney. It would be a little bit...
I would say that we consult Mr. Bingston quite frequently.
I don't see it in here. Nobody else sees it in here.
Well, that is the basis for a lot of our executive sessions,
Okay.
for that specific type of consultation.
The man needs to go to a university. He needs to be a law instructor, a professor.
We're getting a lot of chit-chat time up here. Carol Reed again, Salina. And the Vote Yes mural that's on the Reynolds Law Office, to me, was just very well done. Anyway, and that Vote Yes could, like my sis said, could apply to all kinds of things, Vote Yes. But what it reminds me of is the Vote Yes that Kevin Korb, of course, was sued upon with our Vote Yes and our petition. And at that time, the last I heard, that we spent $51,000 of tax dollars for legal fees. And I was just wondering, is there any more tax dollars being spent on that, or was that a final number? Did we end that court case at $51,000?
There was an appeal filed on their part. There was a counter appeal filed on our part. So there is still ongoing activity.
So what are we at now?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Could you please find that out and report that to us?
Sure.
That's a good segue into a vote yes.
No, well, you've already been up any?
I'm Ken Ritz from Salina. Something came up with this new housing development that I've wondered about for a number of years, and that is electromagnetic radiation, which exists at many levels, including there's been a lot of concern over the years, and if you have little children and they're around instruments like this, here you have to do this, and it's close enough to your brain that there are interactions. How harmful they are, you would know a great deal more about that than I do. But little children are different than us big kids in that there's a lot of development going on, especially in the brain. And so situations that we may be able to tolerate can really derail development in small children. And these high voltage lines, as someone who's worked with cattle and whatever over the years, there have been a number of observations made by ranchers about the effect of high voltage lines running across pastures and grazing areas as to seen primarily in deformities and deaths of calves that are born. You're on the open range, you're not looking at that many hogs or sheep. It's mostly cattle in this part of the world anyway. And I think it would really be worthwhile with this development. But what I've noticed, the reason we have a boulevard is that they were going to run power lines there, so why not put roads on both sides? And that runs very close to a grade school. And I have no idea whether it's the amount of current, the voltage levels. Obviously, it's proximity and exposure time. But I think that's really something that should be looked into, especially if there's a new development going in, because this looks like it's going to be right off their front porch. There'll be these power lines. And whatever it does or doesn't do. With cattle, it's not that hard to run a fair test, because if you have deformed calves, we don't get as upset as with deformed children that are part of the test. You're very limited in what experimenting you can do where humans are involved. So anyway, that's something that's I've wondered about for a long time and think would really be worth exploring. They've just replaced all that along Belmont. If we were going to do something different, we should have done it before that was replaced, if it needed rerouting or whatever. So anyway, that's just a concern.
Rosemary Molly, Salina, Kansas. In regards to Reynolds mural on the side of their building, if that's offensive to somebody and they keep complaining to the code department, when they go up there and put in a new mural on the side of their building, if that becomes offensive to a particular group of people, are they going to start complaining to the code department about another mural? That's basically what I'm asking. Because that's,
just so that
right
we're-
now, I think it's harassment because they keep constantly going after that law office instead of checking other places of business to see if their signs are in code. So I'm just asking.
Just so we understand the issue, and I'm going to ask the city attorney, city manager, the original issue was that it was a political sign within a certain distance of a polling place.
Correct.
And that was the problem.
But it's not voting, and it's not really saying vote for anything, it's just saying vote yes. That could, like everybody said, that could mean anything.
Yeah, it started out as temporary signs as well as the sign on the side of the building in proximity to a polling place. That has been an issue, not just this election, but a prior election. And so at this point, the election's over, and so it turns into a sign question.
No, you've already been up.
So I can't be up again? Oh, okay.
Well, that's our general policy.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Well, everybody else is coming out more than once. Yeah.
Well, they've come up at different times during the meeting. This is citizens forum at this time.
Mayor, Commissioners, Chad Farber again, Salina, Kansas. Electioneering is not taking place now, as it is not election day. I think the concern is that this is a constant attack on this one office or one building because of their mural, their paint scheme on the outside of their building. Done by a granddaughter, done by a grandmother, perhaps that's considered artwork. Some would consider that better artwork than a couple of pieces of macaroni and cheese on a giant fork downtown. But that's their opinion. They can have that opinion. If it is their artwork, they should be able to do so. I understand signed ordinances, but we're looking at a paint scheme on the side of a building. And I believe, contrary to what city manager has said, it has escalated to the point of harassment. I've tried to email you guys about topics for the upcoming forum, public forum, whatever we're going to call it, and my email was shot back to me that that email was not allowed to go through to you guys. I contacted a commissioner. I think I contacted Mayor Davis after that, contacted city manager after that. I haven't heard back from him, so I don't know if that email went through or not. But it's very hard to get in touch with you guys, and some of you are saying, you know, you have that opportunity. You have email, you have Zoom, you have all these different opportunities. Well, not when they don't work. We have to come up here at public forum, and I think today was a fantastic example. We had two ladies who sat here through the entire meeting just so they could come up and give a presentation about the food bank and wanting to get some donations to help out our senior citizens in Salina, when it would have been better served to be at the beginning of the meeting where they could make their plea and then go about their business. But I was emailing you guys about topics for the public forum, and one of those had to do with our law enforcement and policing and citizen safety around us. There is a morale issue within our police department right now, and they are. I've talked to several. There were problems from the top down, from the chief to the deputy chief, and that problem is still in place right now. Part of the problem with morale is that they're being sent to law-abiding citizens' places of business to try to take down signage, try to appease somebody who's calling in a code violation from the parking lot across the street and videotaping so they can get more views on Facebook or TikTok. And the major crimes are taking place all around our community. They make an arrest, and instead of the crime being prosecuted, it goes before a prosecutor who just slaps them on the wrist and tells them don't do that anymore. And it's very, very frustrating to our police department. There are bigger issues in Salina than a couple of words on the side of a building. If it's wrong, let it be worked out. But I believe it has escalated to the point of harassment. Get our priorities straight here in Salina. Thank you guys. I know it's been a kind of a long meeting today, but I appreciate you guys listening today, and I would hope that you would intervene in this a little bit, and let's have some common sense decisions and discussions about this.
Okay. Any comment, persons online, Mr. Wood? All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That sounded like 5. Thank you.